Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard coming to you live from Israel with the biggest headlines from across the region. U.S. President Donald Trump set a deadline for talks with Iran to conclude within the next month as a major American military buildup continues. The aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford and its strike group are now heading towards Iran, a deployment that could take up to 4 weeks, a timeline that appears to align with Trump's diplomatic ultimatum. Speaking outside the White House, Trump urged Iran to make a deal, but warned that if they don't, the U.S. military is ready. Listen to this.
What can Iran do to avoid attack?
Give us the deal that they should have given us the first time. If they give us the right deal, we won't do that. But, you know, historically, they haven't done that. I will say they want to talk, but so far they do a lot of talking and no action.
When are those talks, Mr. President?
They've already started.
Do you want regime change in Iran?
Well, it seems like that would be the best thing that could happen. For 47 years, they've been talking and talking and talking. In the meantime, we've lost a lot of lives while they talk, and legs blown off, arms blown off, faces blown off. It's been going on for a long time, so let's see what happens. In the meantime, we have tremendous power has arrived, and additional power, as you know, another carrier is going out shortly. So we'll see it how. If we could get it settled for once and for all, that would be good.
A crowd of approximately 250,000 gathered in Munich, Germany for a major demonstration against the Islamic Republic's regime, marked by calls for leadership change and support for exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi during his visit to the Munich Security Conference. Here's what Pahlavi had to say.
The Iranian people are in full revolt, and the regime is at the weakest it's ever been. It's on the verge of collapse. It's a matter of time before this regime goes. My point, however, is that the world needs to understand, including the U.S. administration, that whether or not the Western world intervenes, our fight will continue and the regime will collapse anyway. The only question is, at what price do the Iranian people can regain their freedom? If they have the support, there will be less casualties and will happen quicker.
Now, President Trump's Board of Peace is moving from concept to action with its first leaders meeting set for Tuesday in Washington. The president is expected to unveil a multi-billion-dollar Gaza reconstruction plan and lay out details for a UN-authorized stabilization force in the Strip, a key component of the post-war framework. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar will represent Israel at the meeting. That will also include Indonesia, who recently announced that they are committing 8,000 troops to the Gaza stabilization force. Meanwhile, European democracies are keeping their distance after expressing concerns about the board's structure and its relationship to the United Nations. Now, the IDF says its troops shot and killed a Palestinian man who crossed the Gaza ceasefire line in the northern strip. According to the military, the terror operative crossed the line and approached soldiers from the Gaza Division's Northern Brigade in a manner that posed an immediate threat, and were proceeded to open fire and eliminate the suspect. During a visit to Rafah in southern Gaza, IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir said the destruction of all Hamas's frontline battalions is an unprecedented accomplishment, but stressed the war's core objective remains unfinished: the full demilitarization of Gaza. And joining our panel today to discuss all of this is Professor Kobi Michael, Senior Researcher at the INSS and Misgav, and also Mark Regev, former Ambassador to the United Kingdom and former Senior Advisor to the Prime Minister. Thank you, gentlemen, both of you, for coming on to discuss this. We'll begin with the Iran negotiations, and Trump's threats drag on. Mark, what do you make of it?
So I think the ball is very much in the Iranian court. Trump, I think, has been very clear. He said on numerous occasions he prefers a negotiated deal. But if not, he's willing to use force and strike against Iran. And I say the ball's in the Iranian court because the question, and it's a serious question, and I have my doubts, of course, but is the Iranian regime capable of making the compromises that Trump demands, those minimum compromises that are needed? And I'm skeptical because this is a regime that is stuck in its ideological bent, an extremist regime, a regime headed by a very old, 90-year-old autocrat. So I'm not optimistic, but Trump is being clear. He prefers a negotiated deal, But it's not clear to me at all possible that the Iranians are going to agree to that.
Kobe, what do you make of it?
I intend to agree. I think that something must happen. I mean, President Trump and the American administration cannot finish the story by doing nothing. And as I say, the preferable path for President Trump is the diplomatic path. I think that he becomes skeptical as well, like us, like Prime Minister Netanyahu. And the idea that they continue intensifying and accumulating their military power here in the Middle East is an indication to their seriousness. And at the end of the day, things will be changed in a way that Iran will not be capable to continue holding enriched uranium and to enrich uranium. And I think that it will reach also to the ballistic missiles. There are many creative ways to reach to a sort of compromise in order to leave the Iranians with their honor and to respect them, and on the other hand, to assure that we will reach to the objectives that we are looking for, which means that Iran will not have nuclear capabilities, and the ballistic missiles will not be a very severe threat. But as Mark said, we are talking about a very ideological, radical regime. And I'm not sure that at this point, where the regime is so fragile and unstable, they will calculate strategically in a very rational manner, in a way that we understand rationality under these circumstances. And therefore, I think that we have to be ready to the option that they will refuse continue negotiating, and even that they will initiate a sort of military attack on Israel and on the Gulf countries here in the region.
Well, we saw several weeks ago, Trump was promising help to the Iranian protesters who were butchered in the street by the Islamic regime. Meanwhile, Iranian exiles and their allies are trying to take matters into their own hands, rallying behind Pahlavi in that massive rally in Munich. Mark, should Western leaders be doing more of that, supporting the exiled crown prince, or should they not be putting all their eggs in that basket of possible regime change?
You know, it's interesting because I follow the Europeans very closely, and we have Europeans have been keeping a very, very low profile. In other words, in the past, maybe you'd have some French or German or Italian leader who would say, well, we think it's not a time for war, and we urge America to use restraint. And we've heard nothing along those lines whatsoever, which is, I think, a very positive sign. As to whether the pressure will be enough on Iran that they'll agree to the sort of deal that Trump wants, Trump needs, it's, once again, I think the jury is still out. If you want to be an optimist, you'd say the following. You'd say the regime has just come out of an internal crisis, yes, where we saw literally tens of thousands of people on the streets, maybe hundreds of thousands, demonstrating for the fall of the regime, demonstrating for political change. So the political situation internally is very, very tenuous. You add to that the economic crisis that Iran is suffering. Yes, their currency has fallen out of the market. It's really in the toilet. The Iranian economy is really in tatters. And you add to that the military significance of the 12-day war last June, where the Iranians suffered such a defeat that they've never suffered in recent history. So you put all that together and you say the regime is now more vulnerable and weaker than at any point since the Islamic Revolution. So just as Ayatollah Khomeini, the first Ayatollah leader of the Iranian regime, made the peace agreement with Iraq, with Saddam Hussein, because he had no choice. And he said, I'm willing to drink poison if it keeps the Islamic Republic alive. Yes, so will they agree today to drink poison in order to avoid a US strike on Iran and get that deal? Now, once again, I'm doubtful. I'm very doubtful. but that's the hope of the people who want to see diplomacy work.
Kobe, basically, it seems like these negotiations are going to end the way negotiations have for 30 years, where the Iranians are not flexible on on their nuclear program, on the ballistic missile program. Then Trump has to make a decision what he does. What type of actions does he have at his disposal, potentially, military actions against Iran?
First of all, the American
We're having some technical difficulties. Kobe, you with us?
I believe that America will lead if we will reach the phase
Where
the other option and the military, then the American will lead it. I think that Israel will participate in this way or another. There is no doubt that when it comes to operations on the Iranian soil, Israel will be there because Israel has better capacity than the US on the Iranian soil. I mean,
all right. Well, he was cut off. We're gonna go back to you, Mark, because we're having technical problems with our other guest. I'm just asking there about military options because there has been some talk about something like the Venezuela option in Iran, which is to just sweep in and take out Khamenei or kidnap him or something like that, and then sort of hope that the replacement would be better. What other things can the U.S. do? Because the criticism is that if they do a big military strike, it's just, okay, there will be a big military strike. The U.S. isn't willing to commit boots on the ground, and basically nothing will happen. What do you think are the options?
So I think you have to put this in a conceptual framework. It's true that Donald Trump is not Obama. He's not a dove. He was willing to use U.S. military force. We've seen that in the past when he's in his first term, when he took out the leader of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, Qasem Soleimani. We saw it more recently in Venezuela. This man is not a pacifist. But just as he's not Obama, he's not George W. Bush. He's not into nation building. He's not into long, extended wars. I said recently that Trump likes his wars to be destructive, decisive, and done with. In other words, he wants to see the wars over quickly after mission is accomplished. And therefore, I think it's fair to see that we're not talking about boots on the ground at all. We're talking about airstrikes, midnight hammer sort of strikes, which the president is so proud of. We heard him talk about that again and again, especially during his speech here when he addressed the Knesset in Jerusalem. And so it's possible you'll see targeted strikes against military and command facilities, quite possibly against the regime, against the Revolutionary Guards. America has capabilities that allow it to target numerous targets at the same time. And so I would expect surgical airstrikes against regime and key military targets, especially those associated with the Revolutionary Guards.
Right, and then see possibly if after that some parts of the military might take over. That would be the hope, of course, because nation building, massive boots on the ground, that's out of the question. There's too much trauma from Iraq, and that's not something that the base would support. Let's talk about Gaza. The Board of Peace convening for its first meeting. Israel is there. So is Indonesia, with the first significant pledge of troops to the stabilization force. Indonesia probably better than Turkey, but is that good news?
So there's a parallel between Gaza and Iran. Because on Gaza, let's be clear, on Gaza, the message is the same as the message it is to Tehran. In both cases, the Americans are saying you have to do as you have committed to do or as we have requested, or else. So there's a diplomatic option, but the or else means there's a military option. So the American message to Iran is you have to agree to dismantle your nuclear program, deal with the ballistic missile and other issues as well, or else. And to Hamas in Gaza, the parallel message is you have to agree to implement what you promised to do, which Turkey and Qatar promised you would do, which has now got the sanction of a UN Security Council resolution, you have to disarm once again or else. And that's why they're parallel situations. Now, will Hamas actually agree voluntarily to disarm? Like with Iran, here too I'm skeptical. And it's possible it's going to require further Israeli military action and or in a combination of America putting pressure on Turkey and Qatar to follow through against Hamas so they will implement their commitments. But to think that it's going to be easy to disarm Hamas is, of course, a myth.
Right. Let's see if we have Kobe Michael back with us. Just checking. Kobe is with us
Yes,
again.
sorry, I was disconnected from the internet. Yes.
Yes. So we're on to Gaza now, the subject of Gaza. The Board of Peace is convening. Of course, Hamas have not disarmed. Surprise, surprise, because it seems like obviously only the IDF can really disarm Hamas. So how is this thing going to proceed?
Before answering your question, with your permission, I just would like to add something to the things that have been said by Mark with regard to the American strike.
Yeah.
The Americans will not strike only militarily, only kinetically. I think that they will use a cyber operation in a very large scale, and they will operate a very sophisticated cognitive war, and they will support the opposition, the demonstrators, with some required facilities in order to enable them to reorganize themselves more efficiently in a way that will continue the dynamic that the military strike will create, that the cyber strike will create. So it's not only a kinetic operation, and not only from the air. And as I said before, I think that Israel will be in the picture as well when it comes to the added value that Israel has in comparison to the American capacities on the American soil. Now, with regard to your question about Gaza, I think that at the end of the day, and it will take 2 months, 3 months, President Trump will reach to the conclusion that if he wants that his own plan will be implemented, realized, then he has to get rid from the main spoiler, which is Hamas. And there is no any other way, or there is no any other entity which is capable and willing to dismantle Hamas. Only the IDF can do the job, and the IDF will have to accomplish the job. And I assume that if President Trump will remain interested in and enthusiastic in realizing his own plan, then he will give the green line to the IDF in order to accomplish the mission, to occupy the Gaza Strip, to dismantle Hamas, and to facilitate the required conditions for the implementation of his own plan on the Gaza Strip in its entirety. The problem, and this is something which I'm pretty concerned about, is that President Trump will be convinced by Turkey and Qatar. They will do their utmost efforts in order to assure that Hamas will remain as influential actor in the Gaza Strip, and not only there, but even beyond, in the entire Palestinian arena, because they perceive and they see Hamas not as a partner of Fatah or the Palestinian Authority, but as a replacement of the Palestinian Authority, and they want to see Hamas controls the West Bank as well, and therefore they will make their utmost efforts in order to convince President Trump that Hamas needs more time, and the IDF has to withdraw in order to enable Hamas to disarm itself. And there is a need to distinguish between heavy weapon or offensive weapon and light weapon or defensive weapon. And they will come with some other ideas about storaging the weapon in some places that will be controlled by the Egyptians, by the Turks, by the Qatarians, or even by the Palestinian Authority. I don't know. And if President Trump eventually will be convinced, then we are in a problem.
Mark, Kobe, they're touching on the diplomatic, basically major uphill battle that Israel's fighting here because of Qatar and Turkey being involved in the Board of Peace, but just in general, the international community never really caring about these red lines that are put in place, sometimes by the international community itself. I mean, look at Lebanon, where Hezbollah were not supposed to go south of the Litani, and then they just forgot about it, didn't care about it. They violated that repeatedly, and then Israel kind of allowed it to happen. It seems like Israel's trying to make sure that these agreements are upheld, both in Lebanon and in Gaza, but it's a diplomatic struggle to get the international community to recognize that and to give legitimacy to Israeli operations to ensure that it happens. You have a lot of experience in the international scene. What can Israel do to uphold these agreements?
You know, it's good that you mentioned Lebanon, because I think if one wants to understand what Hamas wants, is that they want a Lebanon-type scenario, what Hezbollah did before 2024. In other words, they want to remain the power behind the scenes. That's why, they just want their light weapons. They can conduct terror against their own Gaza Palestinian population. They're not worried that there'll be some sort of board of peace and some sort of transitional Palestinian government, because they will be the ones behind the scenes calling the shots. Exactly as Hezbollah was in Lebanon before 2024. There was a Lebanese government, and they had embassies around the world, and they had, theoretically, they were the legal responsibility, but real power was with Hezbollah. And that's exactly what Hamas wants to do in Gaza, to remain the people with the real political power. And to do that, they have to keep their guns. And that's why even the issue of these small arms, which is a very difficult question. It's a huge obstacle to take away all their small arms. But you can't run away from it. If you want a situation where Hamas no longer runs Gaza, where Hamas no longer calls the shots, where other forces can come to fruition and exercise control, you have to disarm Hamas. There's no other way.
But is there international support for that? That's the question. Everyone in Israel understands that. I think most of the Americans in the Trump administration understand it. But it's a question of, do these other powers that play, particularly Turkey and Qatar, will they play along with it?
It's been passed in a UN Security Council resolution. Theoretically, both Turkey and Qatar committed themselves also to that goal, as did Egypt. Now, are they serious about their commitments? I allow you all to be cynical. But Israel has a justification, and President Trump, more importantly, has a justification to go to Ankara, to go to Doha, to go to Cairo and say, you committed to disarming Hamas. Can you do it diplomatically, or do I give a green light to Israel? And in the real world, Clausewitz famously said that war is just another way of doing politics, yes? Maybe Israel will have to re-intensify military operations, and that will provide the impetus, the spark for a diplomatic process that actually will lead to the final disarmament of Hamas.
Kobi, do you think that the United States, with enough pressure from President Trump on those other players, Qatar, Turkey, Egypt, we have Indonesia involved now, do you think there is this ability to enforce what was agreed regarding the disarmament of Hamas, or is it just going to melt away sort of that promise?
I have no doubt about it. I mean, if President Trump will decide that this is what should be done, then it will be done. President Trump has all the leverages in order to pressure Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt together, as well as he has the leverage to pressure Israel. Okay, we cannot deny it. The problem is that President Trump, and I think that we have noticed in the past, that President Trump has the tendency sometimes to invent realities. And he can decide that Hamas is disarmed, okay? He will adapt, he will embrace the ideas that, the creative ideas that the Turks and the Qatarians and even the Egyptians will bring to him. And he will decide after a sort of, a facade of Hamas that are giving their weapon to the Turks or to the Qatarians or to the Egyptians, or even to a representative of the Palestinian Authority, he will say, we began the disarmament process. This is an indication that we are in the right on the right path, and therefore we continue with the reconstruction process of the Gaza Strip, and they will force Israel to agree to that, and they will force Israel to withdraw from the yellow line. And this is the situation that I'm concerned about. But if President Trump will remain realistic, he will understand that there is no other option but to use force in order to dismantle Hamas, to disarm Hamas. If the Turks and the Egyptians will be able to do that, I really doubt this option. Then he will force them to do that. But if they will not be able to do that, and I think that they are not able to do that, they are not going to send their troops in order to fight Hamas, then the IDF will do that. The problem is, and everything at the end of the day is going back to President Trump and his perception and his decision about the situation on the ground.
Mark, final words briefly about this issue. We have Foreign Minister Gideon Saar. He's going to be at the Board of Peace. How can Israel maybe just take matters into its own hands, its fate into its own hands, and making sure that this happens?
So, first of all, Israel has to be crystal clear that nothing moves forward until we have a moving forward in parallel of Hamas disarmament. And if that doesn't happen, so there's no moving forward to anything new in Gaza. There's no reconstruction. There's no new political regime. Hamas has to disarm, and Israel has to be very, very clear. Now, in President Trump's public statements, he's totally behind that. Now, Kobe is correct to be skeptical. Will the Turks and the Qataris and other people try to convince President Trump otherwise? I'm sure they will. But that's one of the reasons why I thought it was very important that Prime Minister Netanyahu had that almost 3-hour meeting last week with the president to talk about Iran, I presume also to talk about Gaza. There are things that Israel can't accept, and that Hamas remain in power in Gaza because it has the guns. That is simply unacceptable, not just to the Israeli government, but to the Israeli public. After what happened on October 7th, 2023, we will not allow a situation where Hamas continues to rule Gaza and will start on day one trying to reestablish a terror empire that can attack Israel again. That's just not a viable outcome for Israel, and we'll do everything we can, I believe, to prevent that from happening. They must be disarmed.
We'll wait and see how that plays out. Thank you very much, former Ambassador Mark Regev and Professor Kobi Michael, for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has reportedly responded to an inquiry from President Herzog's office, insisting that Netanyahu did not ask President Trump to speak out for a presidential pardon during his White House meeting last week, in which he called the Israeli President Isaac Herzog disgraceful. Listen here.
You know, you have a president that refuses to give him a pardon. I think that man should be ashamed of himself. A pardon over this trial that's going on. The president of Israel, the primary power he's got is the power to give pardons. And he's not, you know, he said he's given it 5 different times, but he doesn't want to do it because I guess he loses his power. I think the people of Israel should really shame him. He's disgraceful for not giving it. He should give it. But Bibi's been a great wartime prime minister, and I've been the best friend to Israel I think that they've ever had. A lot of people say beyond presidents that they've ever had, and we will continue to be. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, Herzog is stressing the rule of law, saying any decision on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's request for a presidential pardon will be made independently, regardless of public pressure from Trump. And the skies over Israel are now beginning to clear, following one of the most severe haze events in recent years. The heavy dust from North Africa blanketed much of the country, turning the sky orange-gray and causing very high to abnormal levels of air pollution. But that is finally clearing up, and we might have better weather ahead of us here in Israel. That's all for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time.
Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review. These are dramatic days in the Middle East as a potential U.S. strike on the Islamic regime of Iran hangs in the balance. Tehran is once again openly threatening Israel and taking a hard line on negotiations, while Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu prepares to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump to discuss the next steps. All the details in the following report. As the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran are set to continue negotiations this week, the Iranian regime is escalating its rhetoric against the United States and Israel. A new billboard unveiled in the heart of Tehran shows a map of Tel Aviv and central Israel with the headline, "Rain of Missiles. It's a small area." This latest threat comes as negotiations between U.S. and Iranian representatives were held in Oman on Friday, the first talks between the two countries since the 12-day war in June of 2025. The Americans reportedly presented clear red lines: a complete halt to uranium enrichment, removal of enriched material, strict limits on ballistic missiles in both range and quantity, and an end to Iran's funding of proxy forces across the region. The Iranian regime has reportedly rejected all of the demands, saying the missiles and regional proxy issues are not up for discussion, and insists on maintaining its right to enrich uranium. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has advanced a planned trip to the United States and is set to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday at the White House. Jerusalem is increasingly concerned that the U.S. administration could enter a nuclear deal with the Islamic Republic without including Iran's ballistic missile program, which presents a clear threat to Israel. Netanyahu is expected to lay out Israel's security concerns to Trump ahead of any potential deal, as Jerusalem insists that the military option is still not off the table, even if Israel will have to go at it alone.
Let's go now to our ILTV correspondent, Libby Alone, live from the White House for an update. Libby, what can you tell us?
Yes, good evening, Kalev. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu landed in Washington yesterday, and upon his arrival, he met at the Blair House with the U.S. President's Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and, of course, Jared Kushner. According to Prime Minister's office, during the meeting, they discussed regional issues, and envoys Witkoff and Kushner updated on the first round of talks they held with Iran last Friday. In a short time, Prime Minister Netanyahu will arrive here at the White House to meet for the 7th time with President Trump. We can say it's a history. Yesterday, in an interview with Fox News, President Trump was asked if a deal with the current regime would last, and he replied, "I would prefer to have a deal without nuclear weapons, without missiles, without all the other things. I can tell you that I see no reason why the Iranian would suddenly agree to give up all of this. They are stalling for time, and I believe that in the end, President Trump will decide to attack." The purpose of the meeting between those two is to both put Netanyahu's important points into the negotiation and also to make final coordination for the attack. Another issue, Prime Minister's trip scheduled for February 18 to 22 has not been canceled, and there is a chance that we will see another meeting between the two in about a week. If he does indeed make another trip to Washington, D.C. next week, Netanyahu will attend the Peace Council meeting on February 19, and he also speak at the AIPAC conference on February 22. That's all for now. We will update you from here.
Libby, thanks for that report.
Well, now joining us to discuss what we expect to see in Washington, as well as with that Board of Peace, is retired Colonel Rich Oatzen, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Rich, thank you so much for joining us today. Always a pleasure to have you on. Let's start with the obvious. What do you expect to see discussed during this visit of Prime Minister Netanyahu with President Trump? And is this an effort to, in effect, derail the negotiations between the U.S. and Iran?
Well, it's good to be with you, Emily. I don't think the goal is to derail them so much, although there are some in Israel who feel like any negotiations with Iran undercut the pressure that needs to be put on to get them to forego the nuclear program, ballistic missile program, obviously very important there as well. But I think the scope of what is doable from Netanyahu's perspective is to make sure that the type of arrangement or understanding between the U.S. and Israel is not what has been referred to as a safe haven negotiation, where Iran is protected from any Israeli strikes or U.S. pressure during the negotiations, but more of an open negotiation so that we negotiate, but at the same time we continue with the U.S., the multilateral, and the Israeli preparations for a strike if it's needed. I think that's the maneuver room that Netanyahu is going to try to get from Trump while he's doing this, to say, okay, talk, but also while you're talking, we need to be prepared to put more pressure on this because it's too important, and we can't let the Ayatollahs do what they've done, frankly, for 30 years now, which is to use the negotiations as an excuse not to make the hard compromises.
Now, one of the things that we know Prime Minister Netanyahu will also be discussing is that board of peace in Gaza. But progress seems very slow, as we heard, and certainly Hamas has not yet been disarmed. What is it going to take for this to actually succeed in the Gaza Strip?
Well, I think Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey are key players here. Not the favored names in Jerusalem these days, but look, they have some influence over Hamas. And I think that the Trump administration, talking indirectly with Hamas leadership, and those three countries in particular, have to point out that this is going to get a lot worse for the Palestinian people, but also for Hamas leadership the longer they try to hold on to these weapons. So, I mean, there's precedents. We can look at the PLO leaving sort of the Levant, Lebanon, and going to Tunisia in the early 80s that sparked a real peace process. It's sort of an analogous situation right now. The other pieces of this are kind of in place, right? There's been a technocratic government named. There's a readiness for them to come in. The Trump administration wants to move ahead to investment and making the life of the Palestinians in the Strip better. So it all comes down to this. Can Hamas's quasi-friends put enough pressure on it to commit, or to do what it has actually said that it and committed to do, which is a substantive, if not in the first stage, total disarmament.
Now, I want to circle back to Iran for a moment. Is there any deal that can be made that would truly take a military strike off the table? I mean, as I'm sure you remember, President Trump started all this conversation by warning the regime not to kill their own people, now tens of thousands of which have already been killed. So how would a deal address the Islamic Republic's 4-decade history of oppressing their own people within the country?
Well, I think President Trump's previous pronouncements on foreign policy in general indicate that he's less worried about the domestic aspects of this. And yes, I think he is, as anybody would be, horrified by the death of maybe 30,000 young Iranians in that wave of protests. But for him, it's more about regional implications. If there's a deal where the 60% and other enriched uranium is out of Iran, at the same time that discussions about ballistic missiles and turning down the enmity towards friends of the United States in the region is ongoing, I think that process could buy some more time for the Iranians. It's sort of, unfortunately, not undoable what they did against the wave of protesters. And I would say that Trump's criticism of the Iran deal that the Obama administration pursued was that it was only nuclear and it did not address the regional misbehavior, this so-called JCPOA. That's one of the reasons he repealed it when he came into office the first time. So I don't think he's going to say, okay, nukes, that's it, we've won, mission accomplished. I think he's going to keep pressing on these other things, but I would expect that the regional proxy use and the ballistic missiles will be primary, and that what has happened with the wave of protests will be secondary.
All right, well, we do have to leave it at that, but I want to thank you, Rich Oateson, for joining us, today, and for shedding some light on this important issue.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Now, in Iran, executions are continuing and a fresh wave of arrests of political reformists. All the while, the regime continues to build up their ballistic missile arsenal. Let's take a look.
In Iran this week, authorities arrested several prominent figures identified with the reformist camp, including Azar Mansouri, head of the Reform Front coalition, along with 2 former parliamentarians. According to Iranian state media, they were detained on charges including acting against national security and coordinating with foreign media. The arrests were announced as part of what officials described as a crackdown on internal dissent. However, the so-called reformists are not an external opposition movement. They're a recognized faction within the structure of the Islamic Republic, operating under the same constitutional framework and ultimate authority of the supreme leader. The detentions come amid continuing public unrest and chants calling not for reform, but for an end to the system itself. In recent years, protesters have increasingly rejected the reformist hardliner divide and have called for regime change, with many expressing support for Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi as a transitional leader. Analysts note that throughout the history of the Islamic Republic, internal factions have been managed, marginalized, or temporarily targeted during periods of heightened pressure from the international community to give the illusion of change in the necessary direction, while the core power structure of the regime always remains intact. At the same time, Iran continues to advance its military capabilities. New reports show the regime is producing hundreds of ballistic missiles per month in underground facilities designed to protect its arsenal from potential strikes. The missiles include both liquid and solid fuel systems with ranges capable of reaching Israel and other regional targets. The expansion is taking place even as diplomatic talks with Western powers continue, and while Iran has refused to place limits on its ballistic missile program in any negotiation framework.
Now, amid the ceasefire in Gaza, the IDF has eliminated and targeted strikes Ahmed Hassan, the head of Hamas's sniper unit in Beit Hanun, and a senior Palestinian Islamic Jihad commander. And amid signs that Hamas will refuse to disarm even as phase 2 of the peace plan advances, the IDF is now preparing for a return to fighting and a plan now ready. The target of the latest IDF strike in Gaza has been identified as Assem Abu Holi, described as the commander of an elite unit in the Al-Quds Brigade's military wing of Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The report says another Islamic Jihad operative was critically wounded in the strike. The IDF also confirmed strikes across Gaza in response to the recent attack on Israeli troops in Rafah. Now, 4 months into the ceasefire with Hamas, Israel is signaling that a return to major fighting in Gaza is back on the table. The IDF is now preparing plans for a possible large-scale offensive aimed at one core goal: disarming Hamas by force. This comes as the Trump administration is trying to advance phase 2 of its plan for the reconstruction of Gaza, with a meeting next week of the Board of Peace assigned to oversee that process. But the IDF is quietly preparing for the possibility that diplomacy will fail and that Hamas will have to be disarmed by military means. Military sources say the Southern Command is drawing up operational plans for a renewed large-scale offensive in Gaza based on the assessment that Hamas has no intention of giving up its weapons voluntarily. For now, the IDF is holding its positions along the so-called Yellow Line, the ceasefire boundary inside the Strip. Commanders say Hamas continues to test Israeli forces with near-daily attempts by operatives to approach or cross the line. The ceasefire agreement reached in October called for the demilitarization of Gaza, but Israel says Hamas has used the pause in fighting to rebuild capabilities, move operatives, and continue tunnel activity. Defense Minister Israel Katz has warned that if Hamas does not disarm, Israel will have no choice but to dismantle the group by force.
Now, the U.S. administration is moving ahead with the first meeting of President Donald Trump's Board of Peace, the new international body meant to shape Gaza's post-war future. The high-level meeting is expected to take place in Washington on February 19th, with fundraising, governance, and security all on the agenda. ILTV's India Naftali is with us to share more. India, what can you tell us?
That's right, Emily. Washington is preparing to convene the Board of Peace for the first time. The group is supposed to oversee Gaza's demilitarization, governance, and eventual reconstruction. The meeting is planned for February 19th in Washington and is expected to include global leaders with a major focus on fundraising for Gaza's rebuilding. The Board of Peace was formally launched last month in Davos, Switzerland, signaling a shift from short-term ceasefire talks to long-term planning for Gaza. Phase 2 of President Trump's plan focuses on disarming Hamas in areas it controls west of the Yellow Line in Gaza, followed by reconstruction and the creation of a new civil administration. However, Israel's position is clear. There will be no reconstruction as long as Hamas remains armed. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is scheduled to meet President Trump in Washington on February 18th, just one day before the Board of Peace gathering. Netanyahu accepted an invitation to join the board, but has not yet signed its founding charter. If he attends the board meeting itself, it would mark his first in-person engagement with Arab and Muslim leaders since the war began on October 7, 2023. The Board of Peace operates under a UN Security Council mandate to help stabilize Gaza and oversee its post-war management for the next 2 years. But the initiative has already faced pushback. Several Western allies have expressed concern that the board could undermine existing international frameworks, including the United Nations itself. Critics also point out that the board has no direct Palestinian representation, a gap that rights groups and diplomats say could limit its legitimacy. Italy has already announced it will not join, citing constitutional limitations, while France and the UK have raised doubts about the board's structure and scope. At the same time, some leaders, including Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban, have confirmed they plan to attend. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Technocratic Committee meant to replace Hamas in governing Gaza has not yet entered the Strip. With billions of dollars needed, Hamas still armed, and key allies undecided, the Board of Peace faces major hurdles before it can make real change on the ground. But with Washington now pushing ahead and Prime Minister Netanyahu in town, the February 19th meeting will likely move things forward. Emily?
All right, thank you, India, for that update.
And Israel's security cabinet has approved what government ministers are describing as a dramatic shift in policy in Judea and Samaria, a move that deepens Israeli control over the territory, touches some of the most sensitive holy sites, and is already drawing sharp Palestinian and international reaction. More on this from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Defense Minister Katz and Finance Minister Smotrich announced that the cabinet okayed a series of decisions designed, in their words, to remove decades-old barriers, repeal discriminatory Jordanian-era laws, and normalize life for Israelis living in Judea and Samaria. One of the most significant changes centers in Hebron, the authority over construction and maintenance for the Jewish community, including at the Tomb of the Patriots, holy to both Jews and Muslims. It will shift fully to Israeli authorities. Until now, under a 1997 agreement, any changes required approval from both Israel and the Palestinian municipality. Another decision establishes a dedicated municipal authority for Rachel's tomb near Bethlehem and expands Israeli oversight and enforcement for areas A and B, formerly under Palestinian civil control, in matters related to water violations, environmental damage, and archaeological protection. The cabinet also approved publication of land registries in Judea and Samaria previously classified. The move would allow potential buyers to identify landowners and pursue property purchases directly. In addition, a Jordanian-era law limiting land ownership to Muslims has been repealed, opening property purchases to non-Muslims. Minister Katz said the moves create legal and civil certainty for residents, while Minister Smotrich said the steps are part of what he called normalizing life in Judea and Samaria and dealing a blow to the idea of a Palestinian state. The Palestinian Authority responded with strong condemnation. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas called the decisions dangerous, declared them null and void, and appealed to the United States and the United Nations to intervene, warning against any changes to Islamic and Christian holy sites, including the mosque compound in Hebron. The measures were approved by the Security Cabinet rather than the full government and come as debate intensifies, both in Israel and internationally, over Israel's long-term direction and intentions in Judea and Samaria.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog is in Australia this week, paying tribute to the victims of the Bondi Beach attack. During his trip, Herzog visited the Jewish community and the location of the massacre. But the Israeli president was met with massive crowds of violent protesters. The demonstration did not once focus on the tens of thousands murdered in Iran, for example. Instead, they took to the streets to protest the arrival of Herzog in Australia. ILTV's Devil Klein has the full story.
This was the scene at the Moriah College Jewish School in Sydney. Speaking to students, waving Israeli and Australian flags, Israeli President Isaac Herzog inspired the Jews of Australia with a touching visit. The purpose of the visit was to be with the community in mourning after the Bondi Beach at the Hanukkah celebration when ISIS-inspired shooters took the lives of 15 Jewish people. And this was the scene yesterday, a touching ceremony where President laid wreaths alongside his wife, paying his final respects to the victims. But this was the scene outside. Pro-Palestinian Australians saw fit to bombard the president on a trip meant to show solidarity and inspire a community in mourning, claiming Herzog was complicit in the deaths of Palestinians in Gaza. The death toll in Iran continues to climb, and uncertainty due to internet blackout is allowing the regime to execute its civilians. But for the people of Iran, not a single flag or chant was in sight. The Bondi Beach attack still stands as the most horrific attack committed on Australian soil in decades, and instead of mourning together with the community, police were forced to separate protesters and mourners.
What you saw last night was New South Wales police being confronted multiple times by a section of that crowd intent on disturbing and disrupting police lines. Now, what we can say today that we couldn't say yesterday is that we had concurrently 7,000 mourners down at the International Convention Centre who were mourning the horrible events of the 14th of December with the President of Israel. New South Wales Police had to keep both protesters and mourners separate so that, as disturbing as the scenes were last night on the news, they weren't even worse as a result of thousands of people clashing together on the streets of Sydney.
Several protesters were arrested in the clashes, and the empathy of the Australian people proved once again to be selective and biased.
One of America's most watched moments will be used this weekend to confront a growing problem: anti-Semitism. During Sunday's Super Bowl between the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots, a new ad from Patriots owner Robert Kraft's Blue Square Alliance Against Hate will air, calling on Americans to stand up to Jew hatred. The BSA, founded by Kraft in 2019, introduced the Blue Square campaign in 2023, highlighting that Jews are disproportionately the victims of 68% of all religious hate crimes. BSA empowers people of all backgrounds to stand up to Jewish hate whenever and wherever they see it. The ad is part of a $15 million effort aimed at turning silence into action. Here's a preview.
Loser. Dude. Did you see that? Should we tell him? So bad. Oh, bro, look at him. Oh my gosh. It's not funny.
Do not listen to that.
Thank you, man.
I know how it feels. Nah. They're not worth it, bro.
Yeah, you're right. I was tripping.
What's your name?
Name's Dave.
David?
Yeah.
Hello.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. See you next week. At U Haifa International, academic excellence isn't just a standard, it's a way of life. With 21 English-taught master's programs, world-class faculty, and Israel's top national score in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, students grow in every direction.
If you really want to challenge yourself academically, grow in a very diverse community, and be immersed in such an important and significant environment, University of Haifa is the place for you.
Located on the stunning Carmel Ridge, the U Haifa blends academic excellence with a welcoming community.
U Haifa International has a great combination of top-notch academics with a great community of students.
Whether you're pursuing a one-year master's or diving into research, U Haifa gives you the tools, mentorship, and real-life insight to make your mark on the world. U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
For more than 200 years, when Israel's most vulnerable needed help, Kolel Chabad was there. When families can't afford food, when seniors are alone, when children are struggling to survive, Kolel Chabad steps in with meals, essentials, and dignity. Right now, thousands of families across Israel are counting on that help. And you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kolel Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now. Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land, the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning Special Places of the Land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong. Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time.
As Tel Aviv keeps attracting a growing number of Olim from North America and Canada, a community fair held at the end of January brought newcomers together to access essential resources, build connections, and facilitate their integration into one of Israel's most vibrant cities. Let's take a look.
Tel Aviv is a city known for its dynamic rhythm, diversity, and wide range of opportunities. But for new immigrants who come to start fresh, integrating into the city's fast-paced lifestyle can be a challenge. This is where Nefesh B'Nefesh comes to help. On January 28th, Nefesh B'Nefesh welcomed over 300 Olim to its Tel Aviv center in partnership with the Jewish National Fund USA and the Azrieli Tower for the event Meet Tel Aviv, a community fair for Olim in Tel Aviv. For one evening, their center became a vibrant, welcoming meeting place where newcomers were given the opportunity to exchange stories, ask questions, and connect with organizations offering support in every stage of integration.
Tonight we have the Meet Tel Aviv, a community fair for Olim living in Tel Aviv. We have over 20 organizations represented here tonight. We have synagogues, we have sports organizations, we have the Ministry of Aliyah and Integration, we have the Tel Aviv Municipality. Everyone is here with the goal of helping Olim find their people, find ways to meet other people, find activities and things to do so they can really stay in Israel and find their footing.
Tel Aviv remains to be one of the most popular destinations for Olim from North America. Nefesh B'Nefesh, together with the Ministry of Aliyah and Integration, the Jewish Agency for Israel, Keren Kayemet L'Israel, and Jewish National Fund USA, continues to strengthen the networks that help new immigrants transform a new city into a home.
Nefesh acts as this amazing hub, not just for Anglos, but for even locals here who want to get involved with the Olim and immigrant community. So these type of evenings and organizations are really, really important to not just the vitality of Israel, but the vitality of the immigrant community as a whole.
Events like the Meet Tel Aviv serve as a bridge for newcomers, giving them the opportunity to connect with other Olim who have the same struggles, gain access to essential services, and develop the social and professional networks necessary for a seamless transition.
Our mission is to help women that came from all over the world to Israel, Zionists, to integrate into Israel, to make business connections, to get new jobs, to meet friends, to just have a wonderful life in Israel.
The past years have brought a steady increase in North American Aliyah to the city, which highlights the importance of gatherings like this community fair. As these numbers keep rising, events like this play a key role in helping newcomers navigate their transition and build lasting connections in Israel.
I came here looking for a community, and it's incredible how many resources there are for Olim who are looking to find that community. I've been really fortunate to kind of build my own community through just random opportunities there are throughout Tel Aviv, and organizations and events like this as just one of the many ways to be able to connect with people.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard coming to you live from Israel with the biggest headlines from across the region. U.S. President Donald Trump set a deadline for talks with Iran to conclude within the next month as a major American military buildup continues. The aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford and its strike group are now heading towards Iran, a deployment that could take up to 4 weeks, a timeline that appears to align with Trump's diplomatic ultimatum. Speaking outside the White House, the U.S. president urged Iran to make a deal, but warned that if they don't, the U.S. military is ready. Listen to this.
What can Iran do to avoid attack? Give us the deal that they should have given us the first time. If they give us the right deal, we won't do that. But, you know, historically, they haven't done that. I will say they want to talk, but so far they do a lot of talking and no action.
When are those talks, Mr. President?
They've already started.
Do you want regime change in Iran?
Well, it seems like that would be the best thing that could happen. For 47 years, they've been talking and talking and talking. In the meantime, we've lost a lot of lives while they talk, and legs blown off, arms blown off, faces blown off. It's been going on for a long time. So let's see what happens. In the meantime, we have tremendous power has arrived, and additional power, as you know, another carrier is going out shortly. So we'll see it how if we could get it settled for once and for all, that would be good.
A crowd of approximately 250,000 people gathered in Munich, Germany for a major demonstration against the Islamic Republic's regime, marked by calls for leadership change and support for exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi during his visit to the Munich Security Conference. Here's what Pahlavi had to say.
The Iranian people are in full revolt, and the regime is at the weakest it's ever been. It's on the verge of collapse. It's a matter of time before this regime goes. My point, however, is that the world needs to understand, including the U.S. administration, that whether or not the Western world intervenes, our fight will continue and the regime will collapse anyway. The only question is at what price do the Iranian people can regain their freedom. If they have the support, there will be less casualties and will happen quicker.
President Donald Trump's Board of Peace is moving from concept to action, with its first leaders meeting set for Tuesday in Washington. President Trump is expected to unveil a multi-billion-dollar Gaza reconstruction plan and lay out details for a UN-authorized stabilization force in the Strip, a key component of his post-war framework. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar will represent Israel at the meeting that will also include Indonesia, who recently announced they are committing 8,000 troops to the Gaza stabilization force. Meanwhile, European democracies are reportedly keeping their distance after expressing concern about the board's structure and its relationship to the United Nations. Now, the IDF says its troops shot and killed a Palestinian man who crossed the Gaza ceasefire line in the northern Strip. According to the military, the terror operative crossed the ceasefire line and approached soldiers from the Gaza Division's Northern Brigade in a manner that posed an immediate threat, proceeding to open fire and eliminate the suspect. During a visit to Rafah in southern Gaza, IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir said the destruction of all of Hamas's frontline battalions is an unprecedented accomplishment, but stressed the war's core objective remains unfinished: the full demilitarization of Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has responded to an inquiry from President Herzog's office, insisting that Netanyahu did not ask President Trump to speak out for a presidential pardon during his White House meeting last week. Herzog is stressing the rule of law, saying any decision on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's request for a presidential pardon in his trial will be independent, despite public pressure from U.S. President Trump. The statement followed remarks by Trump at the White House, where he repeated his call for clemency, an appeal he first made in writing last November. And that's all for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. You can scan the QR code on your screen to download our WhatsApp channel to get constant updates throughout the day directly to your phone from ILTV. We will see you next time.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth, and today we're exposing the truth about the Iranian opposition. After all, everyone's asking, if not the Islamic Republic, then who or what? There absolutely is a viable alternative to the Islamic Republic, but as of now, only one. Now, one of the biggest lies being told about Iran right now is that there are many figures in the Iranian opposition, and that the West needs to somehow hear from all of these figures and options before deciding if they're going to throw support behind someone. Now, this entire approach rests on false premises because those claiming to be alternative opposition are not, in fact, opposition at all. And here's why. Take, for example, the Mujahideen, also known as MEK or NCRI in the United States. They're a Marxist Islamist group that previously was on the terror list in the United States. They're very loud, they're very well funded, especially in their network of groups that operate outside of Iran, and they have no shortage of lobbyists. Inside Iran, however, zero legitimacy. In fact, they're on par with the regime itself in terms of how hated they are. Now, it's crucial to understand that, contrary to how they present themselves, the MEK is not a democratic opposition movement. Former members have described how it operates like a cult. And in the 1970s, they carried out assassinations of American military and civilian personnel in Iran, including U.S. Air Force officers and a U.S. Army lieutenant colonel. Now, after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, the MEK supported Khomeini and publicly backed the U.S. Embassy hostage crisis. MEK was also responsible for the trashing of the Israeli diplomatic office inside Tehran, among other groups, during the revolution. Only after losing power to the clerical regime did they turn their violence against the Islamic Republic, after first helping them overthrow the Shah in 1979. In 1981, the MEK also carried out a series of bombings that killed senior Iranian officials and civilians. And when they were forced out of Iran, they didn't turn to the Iranian people, they turned to Saddam Hussein. The MEK was based in Iraq for decades, funded, armed, and protected by Saddam. And they even participated in his war against Iran. This is just one of several reasons that the MEK is viewed inside Iran not as an opposition group, but as a traitorous terror group. The 2026 JNS International Policy Summit is coming up April 15 to 17th at the Waldorf Astoria in Jerusalem. It's shaping up to be a phenomenal few days, and we'd love for you to join us. Visit jnssummit.org to register and take a look at the speaker lineup, including me. It's a top-level group. Hope to meet you in Jerusalem this April. While polls in Iran are, of course, limited, those that have been conducted show less than 1% support among Iranians inside of Iran and less than 6% amongst Iranians abroad. So why do they keep coming up in discussions of opposition? Let's talk about how the MEK operates today. The group is under the absolute control of Maryam Rajavi, who calls herself literally Iran's president-elect, despite no one electing her. Now, former members have described, as I mentioned, the MEK as a cult that practices forced divorce, forced celibacy, family separation, psychological and physical abuse, and in some cases, forced sterilization of women, according to reports. Former members have also testified to sexual abuse and coercion by the leadership. Now, today, its most devoted members live in a compound known as Ashraf 3 in Albania, isolated from the outside world, while their leadership lives comfortably in Europe. And how are they able to sustain all this? Money. The MEK has poured millions of dollars into buying legitimacy. They paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for speeches from American politicians and even former officials such as Rudy Giuliani, John Bolton, and even former Vice President Mike Pence. They spent at least $5.1 million on lobbying firms just to get delisted as a foreign terrorist organization in the United States. And they also pushed legislation in the United States claiming to support a free Iran, but explicitly endorse MEK's 10-point plan from their front group in America, the National Council of Resistance in Iran, as I mentioned, NCRI. Now, the NCRI functions as the MEK's political arm and its liaison to Western lawmakers. They intentionally misrepresent themselves as being somehow representative of Iranians, leaving lawmakers confused as to their lobbying access and that they actually have popular support from Iranians. Any support for MEK, in fact, ends up empowering groups that Iranians reject. But what about alternatives inside of Iran, right? Let's talk about the other fake opposition, reformists. Today in the international media, we're hearing a lot about so-called reformists, such as the president of the Islamic Republic today, Masoud Pezeshkian. Now, what's important to understand here is that there is no such thing as reforming in the Islamic Republic. The mullahs even create fake opposition so that the regime always ultimately stays in control. And that's why Pezeshkian is the president in the first place. When international pressure on the Islamic regime increases, so too does the discussion of reforms domestically to improve, supposedly, the situation for the people. Now, the problem is that there are never actual meaningful changes. It's a tactic demonstrated for 47 years. For example, when the regime murdered 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian Mahsa Amini, they discussed loosening hijab laws. Well, there was pressure. But the second that everyone continued with the news cycle internationally, they actually passed a crackdown on the mandatory hijab. And this is why Iranians, from left to right politically, are almost entirely united today against the idea of reform, because it's simply not possible under the Islamic regime's system. Reformists are a managed faction within the Islamic Republic designed to preserve the system. That's why figures like Mohammad Khatami, widely considered a reformist, never challenged the guardianship of the Islamic jurist, the system, which rules the decisions of the regime. Reformism exists to buy time, to calm protests, to convince the West that the regime can somehow be fixed. Every major protest wave has proven this to be false. Now, here is the key question. If the MEK is a cult, and reformists serve that regime, who actually has the legitimacy to lead a new and free Iran? The answer is the person that the Iranians keep risking their lives to support, and the person that MEK and the regime both will do anything to try to take down, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. Now, it's critical to understand that this doesn't mean a monarchy is being imposed on Iran. In fact, this is one of the most dishonest attacks used against Iranians and the Crown Prince today. He himself has consistently said he's in favor of a democratic transition, and he doesn't want to be king. He said explicitly, including in my interviews with him, that the future system must be decided by the Iranian people alone in a referendum, and that he looks to examples of constitutional monarchy or parliamentary monarchy as examples. The reality is that transitions require trust and coordination. They require a figure who can unify, communicate, and protect a path to a democratic process. We're also talking about a region that isn't like the West. They don't always have the same level of civic advancement that democratic states might have. Take Egypt, for example. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is no champion of civil rights, but he's dealing with terrorist insurgencies constantly. Does the U.S. refuse support as a result? No, because he is advancing stability in the region. So why this pretend facade of the West not wanting to formally endorse and back the Crown Prince as a transition leader in a free Iran because of democracy? This is a prime example of Western stupidity and hypocrisy. Here you have a leader that's pro-West, who wants to reform Iran into a friendly, democratic country, who has the backing to unify a fractured, broken country, who doesn't even want to be king, and you're hesitating? Contrast that with the stupidity exemplified by the West on Syria. They're propping up a former terrorist to take over the country where he is already mass slaughtering minorities, but not a word from the same democracy advocates that are so hesitant about Iran. And I'm sorry, but if the Iranian people actually did hypothetically end up choosing a full-on monarchy, who is the West to tell them otherwise? Why can we accept monarchy for all kinds of U.S. allies in the region, including, by the way, gross human rights violators like Qatar, but for Iranians, it's unacceptable? This is imperialism. And if the West really cares about democracy, then they should be throwing everything they have behind Reza Pahlavi. Iranians shouldn't be required to meet a higher standard than any other people fighting a dictatorship. So here's what should be done. Stop platforming the MEK and its front network. For lawmakers, stop confusing lobbying with legitimacy. Follow the money when you see voices that are obsessively bashing the crown prince. And most of all, listen to Iranians inside Iran and respect their right to choose their own future. That is what real solidarity looks like, and that is the truth about the Iranian opposition. For years, Iranians have been saying something very simple and very uncomfortable, that the National Iranian American Council, NIAC, does not act like a neutral community group. It acts like an unofficial lobby for the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, for a long time, that claim was dismissed as angry rhetoric or exile infighting until this week. This week, a regime official went on a regime-affiliated political talk show and said the quiet part out loud. Take a look.
مطابق سبک خودمون که سبک خودمون چی باید باشه من شما میشینیم بعداً صحبت می‌کنیم الان
به سبک خودمون
جلوی دور
به سبک خودمون تریتا پارسی بود دیگه آقای دکتر
حالا بله
اون لابی که گفتید رو خیلی خلاصه در حد 30 ثانیه میگم ببینید عرب لابیشون آدم محوره میرن با کوشنر میبندن اسرائیلیا لابیشون ساختار داره نظام داره پول داره بودجه داره آیپک داره سیپک داره این اسرائیلیا عرب اون شکل واسه ایران اینها مقدور نیست واسه ایران این اجازه رو نمیدن نمیشه لابی شما رفتید ساختید اونجا نایاک رو آبرو و شرف ایران و ایرانی رو بردن اونجا اصلا آبروریزی اونم که شد برجام شکست خورد والا به خدا نسخه‌ای که میپیچید خیلی ضعیفه و جواب نمیده
You created a lobby called NIAC. Oops. Well, what we saw here obviously was them accidentally, because this is being recorded, implied that, of course, Trita Parsi, the co-founder of NIAC, and NIAC itself were both part of the regime's network. Not opponents, not outside actors, part of the system, which is what they've been accused of for years by Iranians. Now, that moment matters because it gives context to what we've been watching, particularly since protests broke out inside Iran in December. Narrative warfare, especially on social media. So when those protests began, the regime didn't just respond with executions and mass arrests. It responded with a full-scale information war spearheaded by the IRGC's cyber forces. Since December, the Islamic Republic has been running a coordinated disinformation campaign through these cyber units aimed primarily at foreign audiences. Yes, you. This was not random online chaos. It is a deliberate strategy and one they've used before. IRGC-linked networks activated large clusters of accounts across X, Telegram, Instagram, and YouTube. These were not all obvious bots like with flags and spam bios. They were designed intentionally to look believable. They posed as Western left-wing activists, as anti-war campaigners, human rights commentators, and even concerned Iranians calling for caution. And the point was plausibility. The messaging was remarkably consistent. Identical phrases appeared across unrelated accounts, warning of a Syria-like scenario, claiming that the protests were exaggerated or limited, directly accusing the US and Israel of supposedly orchestrating these protests, and insisting, of course, that there was no real alternative to the regime. This was not organic debate, it's coordinated message deployment. Just as important, this campaign was built for you, not for Iranians. The content was written in polished English and aimed at journalists, at policy analysts, at influencers, and regime violence, of course, was downplayed. Executions were cast as unconfirmed, and the very clear and public calls for Reza Pahlavi that were on the street across Iran were accused of being AI. At the same time, the risk of war, state collapse in a war that drags in the US, and regional instability was heavily exaggerated in all this content to create fear and hesitation in Western audiences. A core part of this strategy was also division. IRGC-linked accounts spent a disproportionate amount of time smearing Iranian opposition figures, and by that I mean Reza Pahlavi, especially those gaining international attention. The attacks on Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi followed a very familiar script. He's a foreign puppet, monarchy is a threat, he has no real support inside Iran. The goal wasn't to win an argument, but to create doubt and confusion, especially in Western leaders. And this is where NIAC and Trita Parsi re-enter the story. For years, both have pushed public positions that coincidentally align with the exact same regime objectives at precise moments. During major protest waves, including 2019 and 2022, when Iranians were calling for international international pressure and accountability, NIAC focused its energy on opposing sanctions, opposing isolation of the regime, and warning that supporting the opposition was dangerous, even whilst Iranians were being butchered by that regime. Literally, when Iranians were being shot and executed, NIAC was lobbying against measures that would weaken the regime. And its co-founder, Trita Parsi, has consistently framed Israel and the United States as the primary drivers of instability, while consistently downplaying the role of the Islamic Republic itself. He has also repeated many anti-Semitic conspiracies claiming Zionist control of U.S. policy and other weird Jew-obsessed conspiracies that closely mirror the regime's own rhetoric. Now, this matters because when IRGC cyber networks push a message and that same message shows up in NGO statements, media, op-eds, and panel discussions, it creates an illusion that this is what Iranians think and feel. But it's not. You're seeing a carefully curated reality built by bots, amplified by useful idiots, and laundered through respectable-looking platforms. When you're convinced the protests are small, divided, or too risky to support, the regime buys time. And time is its most important weapon. This is why narrative warfare matters. Bullets silence people, but the narratives, they can silence movements. And the only remedy to that is education. We have to learn how coordinated inauthentic behavior works, to question identical talking points appearing across unrelated accounts. Pay attention to who benefits from these messages, and stop confusing NGO branding and representation and access with legitimacy. Above all, as I said before, listen to Iranians inside Iran, not the voices that consistently ask you to lower expectations, delay action, and accept the status quo. And now to wrap up the good, the bad, and the ugly. I actually have an amazing, not just good story for you today to start us off. Everyone has been talking about the Super Bowl ad from Robert Kraft's Blue Square campaign, but if you ask me, this is what the Super Bowl ad should have been. Check it out.
A story over a decade in the making, Israel bobsled. 3 months ago, 5 Jews, a Druze, and a Shiba Inu took Israel to the ice to fulfill an impossible dream.
Some call them shul runnings or the little sled that could. Truly just an inspiring run for a team that has made the impossible possible.
A story that can be described as only in Israel. Blood, sweat, tears, and a massive dose of never say never.
Bobsled's band of underdogs now standing on the cusp of Olympic history. Hard to believe.
Shul runnings. I absolutely love it. It's so cool. And I have to say, I know AJ, the leader of this bobsled team, he also was an Olympian in skeleton, and they've been working for this for 12 years. I mean, it's truly, truly inspiring and an Israeli story of heart and historic achievement at the Milan Cortina 2026 Winter Olympics. And Israel is indeed sending its first ever bobsled team, as we saw, to the games, a group of athletes who came from really unexpected sports backgrounds. Like, I want to add a few more comments about this just because it's so cool. They came from pole vaulting, shot put, rugby, even, as I mentioned, AJ, who previously competed in skeleton at the Olympic Games. He actually taught himself bobsled by watching videos online. And this team qualified after years of pushing and training abroad, paying for everything themselves. And this is what makes this really special, I think, for me, is that for the first time in history, a Druze Israeli is representing the state of Israel at the Olympic Games. And it's also the first time anyone from the Arab society in Israel has represented Israel in the Winter Olympics as well. So 2 different major milestones of inclusion and pride for the Druze community and for the entire nation. This team is doing what Israeli athletes have always done best, overcoming the odds and making their country proud on the biggest stage despite the odds. So wishing good luck to all of Team Israel, and especially this amazing bobsled team, including AJ Edelman and all the team. We are with you. And today's bad story is a warning about a very real national security threat that's been happening here in Israel right under everyone's nose. Now, according to a new report, the Islamic Republic of Iran intelligence services have spent the last 2 years running a widespread recruitment campaign targeting Israeli civilians in an attempt to turn them into spies for sabotage, influence, and intelligence operations within Israel. We've heard about a few of them, but the Iranians are not only recruiting professional assets, they're throwing out small jobs and quick cash opportunities to cast a wide net and to get people to do simple tasks that could lead to much deeper compromise. They're using social media phishing, messages online, recruitment offers, and financial incentives to lure, in particular, adolescents, students, and even adults with no security training who think that they're just doing small tasks until suddenly they're helping an enemy state operate inside Israel. The goal is sabotage, influence, and undermining Israeli society from the inside. It's also a reminder, of course, that Iranian intelligence is constantly looking for ways to exploit vulnerabilities beyond missiles and military threats, and that the battle for Israel's security happens online just as much as it does on the ground. And finally, the ugly story of this week is from none other than the New York City Mayor Mamdani, who this week cited Islam, yes, Islam, as the reason he signed an order limiting cooperation with ICE. So much for separation of church and state, right? Take a look.
And I consider my own faith, Islam, a religion built upon a narrative of migration. The story of the Hijrah reminds us that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a stranger too, who fled Mecca and was welcomed in Medina. Surah An-Nahl 1642 tells us, "As for those who immigrated in the cause of Allah after being persecuted, we will surely bless them with a good home in this world." Or, as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Islam began as something strange and will go back to being strange. So glad tidings to the strangers."
So there's a few key aspects that the mayor failed to mention here. First off, Mamdani refers to the Hijrah as his moral, backing for this new order limiting the city cooperation with ICE. But what is the Hijrah story? Well, the Prophet Muhammad came to Medina from Mecca, where he faced persecution, and was welcomed by many there, including, of course, Christians and Jews who were there. Then, suddenly, the tone changed with permission for all manner of distasteful behaviors, from forced conversions to theft of property of non-Muslims to polygamy and sex slavery. After he built an army and slaughtered the non-believers, including the Jews of Khaybar, he incidentally returned to Mecca to conquer there too. So when Mamdani uses a story like this, or even uses the historical example of Islam, that's not a good thing. And let's not forget about the fact that when we talk about migration in Islam, a very generous term he applied there, historically speaking, we're not talking about immigration. We're talking about colonization and erasure of countless indigenous cultures in the Middle East and beyond. Islamic colonization took over and Arabized indigenous peoples across the region, and then went to tremendous efforts to rewrite history and present themselves as the victims, when in fact, they were the aggressors. This is gaslighting 101, and it's no wonder that we see such conduct from the charlatan of New York City, Zoran Mamdani. And with that ugly, ugly story, we wrap up this week's episode. But of course, we'll be back next week and later in the week with an exclusive interview with Shurat ad-Din CEO Nitzana Darshan-Leitner to discuss her critical work holding terror groups and regimes accountable in the courtroom. In fact, this week it was announced that the families of the victims in Majd al-Shams, the horrific attack by Hezbollah on a children's football field where 12 Israeli Druze children were killed, is suing Hezbollah for $25 million. Stay tuned for the interview only on JNS, and we'll see you next week on Axis of Truth.
At U Haifa International, academic excellence isn't just a standard, it's a way of life. With 21 English-taught master's programs, world-class faculty, and Israel's top national score in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, students grow in every direction.
If you really want to challenge yourself academically, grow in a very diverse community, and be immersed in such an important and significant environment, University of Haifa is the place for you.
Located on the stunning Carmel Ridge, the U Haifa blends academic excellence with a welcoming community.
U Haifa International has a great combination of top-notch academics with a great community of students.
Whether you're pursuing a one-year master's or diving into research, U Haifa gives you the tools, mentorship, and real-life insight to make your mark on the world. U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Khaled Ben David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments in security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu meet in Washington to discuss the latest developments on Iran and Gaza, with the PM urging Trump to insist any deal with Tehran include limitations on its ballistic missile program and support for terror proxies, along with the nuclear issue. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei remains defiant in the face of a massive U.S. military buildup in the region. President Trump's Board of Peace, comprised of world leaders expected to fund and oversee the reconstruction of Gaza, is set to hold its first working meeting in Washington on February 19th. The leaders of Qatar, Turkey, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Indonesia, and others are among those invited to attend. After several clashes with terrorists in North and South Gaza along the Yellow Line boundary, the IDF eliminates Ahmed Hassan, head of Hamas's sniper unit in Beit Hanun, and senior Palestinian Islamic Jihad operative Asim Abu Holi, commander of an elite unit in the Al-Quds Brigade. An Israeli airstrike in South Lebanon's Yanu region eliminates Ahmed Ali Salami, the commander of Hezbollah's artillery forces. In another operation in the Har-Dol border area, Israeli security forces capture a senior operative from the Jamal Islamiyah terrorist group. Major Ella Wawaye is appointed as the new IDF spokesperson to Arab media, replacing her former commander, Avichai Adrai, who held that role for 2 decades. Known in the Arab world as Captain Ella, she is the highest-ranking Arab woman serving in the Israeli military. And now our big story. Israel is urging the U.S. to take a tough line in its negotiations with Iran, insisting that limitation on the regime's ballistic missile program and support for terror proxies must be included alongside the nuclear issue. But as Iran shows little signs of accepting any such deal, will President Trump stand firm with Tehran and finally pull the trigger on military action amid a buildup of U.S. forces in the region? Well, here's what Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump had to say ahead of their meeting.
בנסיעה הזאת אנחנו נדון בשורה של נושאים, עזה, האזור, אבל כמובן, בראש ובראשונה, במשא ומתן עם איראן. אני אציג בפני הנשיא את התפיסות שלנו לגבי העקרונות במשא ומתן, העקרונות החשובים. בעיניי הם עקרונות חשובים לא רק לישראל, אלא לכל מי שבעולם רוצה שלום וביטחון במזרח התיכון. תודה רבה.
They want to make a deal. They wouldn't talk to anybody else, but they're talking to me. But, you know, it's a good question. A lot of people say no. And I would say that I'd rather make a deal. It's got to be a good deal. No nuclear weapons, no missiles, no this, no that, all the different things that you want.
And joining us in studio for more is Ambassador Mark Regev. He is the former Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom, also former advisor and spokesperson to the Prime Minister. And from Washington, D.C., Ron Campius, former bureau chief for JTA there, or now writes on Substack. Ambassador Regev, I want to start with you. We heard publicly what President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu had to say behind closed doors in the White House. Talk to us about what you think the Prime Minister had to say to the President.
Look, it's clear that President Trump has expressed continuously his preference for a deal with the Iranians. And he says it's not going to be a bad deal like Obama made, but he's committed to getting that deal. So the first question is, are the Iranians going to agree to the sort of compromises that Trump is demanding of them? And that's an open question. But there's also a question on the Israeli side, will President Trump stand for all the interests that are crucial for Israel? And that's, I think, the whole point of the visit. The whole point of the visit is that Netanyahu wants to tell Trump face to face what's important for Israel here. And it's, as you said correctly, the issue of the ballistic missiles, the issue of support for terror proxies, and most importantly, and this is what the Israeli side was briefing before the visit, the issue was that you don't give the Iranians just, they sign some agreement and smile and they get sanctions relief. No. Sanctions relief will be step by step and based only on performance, not on commitments, but on the implementation of the commitment.
Right. And Iran, as Ambassador Regev rightly points out, President Trump certainly would like a deal. The question is, would he go along with the one that meets all the conditions Israel is talking about? He's gone back and forth on that, stressing the nuclear issue, sometimes including, for example, the missiles and terror proxies. Where do you see him leaning right now at this moment?
Well, I think that Netanyahu is at this meeting with much higher stakes than Trump. Trump has this sort of superpower, this magical power of brokering agreements that don't really differ that much from their predecessors. For instance, during his first term, he brokered a new NAFTA that didn't really differ from the old NAFTA, and then declaring victory and convincing at least his base that he's done it, that he's done something better than Biden or Obama did. And I think that would be Netanyahu's big fear going into this meeting, that Trump would get the same kind of deal that the Iran nuclear deal was in 2015, say it was a better deal, sell it as a better deal, but it doesn't have the elements that made that deal flawed from Israel's perspective. For instance, limiting missile production. For instance, cracking down on the terror proxies, and also not including sundowning on inspections, which that deal included. Ending inspections after 10 years, for instance. Those are the kinds of things that I think Netanyahu would fear. And so what Trump, as he said in his briefing, he wants a deal. What kind of deal would satisfy him is, I think, what correctly concerns the Israelis.
Right. And Mark, what are the options for Israel? We know that Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke out strongly against what he saw as a very flawed deal agreed to by President Obama. How much room is there actually for the Prime Minister to maneuver with such a close ally as President Trump?
So it's very different, because at the time of the Obama deal, and I was in government at the time, I remember, the Americans actually didn't tell Israel about the talks. It was done behind Israel's back, and we found out about it through intelligence, because we followed what the Iranians were doing. And this is very different. As you know, the American team has been very transparent with the Israelis, very good communication on all levels. And I think that's why, Netanyahu was invited to the White House. And, they want to hear Israel's concerns. They want to try to make sure that we're on board. But I think you raise a good question. If Trump actually decides he wants to go forward and Israel isn't 100% behind it, so we have to be very, very cautious about how we use our muscle power if we have. And here it's a challenge for the Prime Minister. I would argue that if he's going in a direction we don't like, at least we should work to minimize the elements of the deal we don't like. And I think we do have that influence in the White House. We do have a certain amount of leverage. And Netanyahu should, in my opinion, concentrate on what is possible. In other words, the sort of thing that Ron said about, no automatic, ending of inspection at a certain period in the future. The idea of sanctions relief, it's clear what the Iranians want, but it shouldn't be something that's either, black or white. It should be a lot of grey, and it should be step by step, and it should be based on performance, not on promises.
Right. And Ron, we know that it seems that there are differing views within the administration about how to approach this issue. Talk about the sort of pressures, the other voices besides Prime Minister Netanyahu that President Trump is listening to as he makes this crucial decision.
Well, that's interesting because it comes down to something that Trump himself has raised, which is who should succeed him. He said that, he's famously said a couple of weeks ago, I think, that he thinks a Rubio-Vance ticket would romp to the presidency in 2028. But the question is, who's on top, Rubio or Vance? And that's how the tensions break down. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, who has proven to be very loyal to Trump, is also very much an internationalist, somebody who has always been very wary of any sort of expansion of Iranian power in the region. And J.D. Vance leans much more isolationist. He does not, I think if he were to go into 2028 on the top of the ticket, he would not want to have been part of an administration that led America into any kind of intractable war. And so he sees any kind of heightening of tensions in the Middle East with Iran as perhaps leading to that. So those are the pressures that Trump is facing. I think he listens to both men. He also he takes his own counsel above all. But those are the kinds of things he has to deal with, along with domestic pressures. He's having a very difficult time now domestically, and he wants a victory.
Right. We know President Trump would like to see a deal, Mark, but we also know that in contrast to some of his predecessors, he's willing to use military force if he deems it necessary. Let's take a look at that route there. What could Prime Minister Netanyahu be talking and spoken again behind closed doors about what the role of Israel will be if, in fact, it comes down to an attack on Iran?
Could I challenge, with respect, the premise of your question? You say that Trump has a military option and Trump has a diplomatic option. And I would argue the two are interrelated. There's something called coercive diplomacy.
Right.
And I don't pretend to be an expert on Trump, but what I do understand is this. He's a tough negotiator. He believes in making deals that are good for, himself and the United States of America. And he thinks now the Iranians are weak. The Iranians are economically falling apart. Their regime is under great internal tensions. They barely survived the recent wave of protests. And he's moved all these military assets into the region. Now, he can use them. But basically, at the moment so far, he's using the threat of the use of force. It's like he's put a pistol to their temples and saying to them, you agree to a deal that you've never agreed to before. Take apart your nuclear program, limit your missile capabilities, and so forth and so on, or else. Once again, I think in many ways the ball is in the Iranian court. Does this extremist regime headed by this elderly, close to, what is he, 80 years old more, close to 90?
Close to 90.
Yeah, Ayatollah, is he in a situation where he believes that he needs to make these concessions to keep the regime in power? And that is an open question. If he doesn't give Trump the concessions, if he doesn't give him something to work with, there will be war.
All right. Well, I think it was von Clausewitz who said war is diplomacy by other means. That may be the case. And Ron, I just want to ask you, the Iranians, of course, President Trump earlier talked about help is on the way to those Iranian protesters in the streets. But at this stage, does it look like the U.S., there would be support for President Trump to take military action to the point of possible regime change in Iran?
I don't think so. I think that there would be little support for that. I think part of the rhetoric here on both sides of the aisle, among Republicans and among Democrats, is that one does not intervene in other countries because of what they're doing internally. I think that that's informed, and that's become accentuated under the Trump administration. Otherwise, you have the repeat of the Iraq War. Remember that one of the premises for the Iraq War, and it was a real premise, nobody was actually lying about it, was that Saddam was posed a real threat to the Kurds who were inside Iraq, and that's one of the right ways that the Bush administration sold the Iraq war. And that's just not going to happen again, I think, because of the fallout of that kind of thing. Same with Afghanistan. The Taliban's oppression of women was a big selling point in terms of maintaining the Western, the American-led presence there. People don't want that anymore. So intervening on behalf of the domestic uprising, however much those people get our sympathies because they are in a terrible, terrible situation, I don't think it's a good sell for the American public.
All right. Well, that's unfortunate to hear, certainly for the brave and courageous Iranian people. Ambassador Regev, Ron Campius, please stay with us. I want to move to another topic that's certainly going to was discussed there in the White House. Next week, phase 2 of the Gaza peace plan is set to advance with the first working meeting of the so-called Board of Peace, consisting of leaders whose countries are expected to both fund and to some degree oversee the reconstruction of Gaza. But the board includes such nations as Turkey and Qatar that Israel sees as problematic to the process. And of course, the big question remains of whether Hamas will disarm, and if so, who handles that process. And let me start, Ambassador Regev, with the key question of how Israel does. We're hearing even today sources in the security establishment in Israel saying eventually, with all this talk of peace, the IDF will have to go in and dismantle the rest of Hamas by itself.
There's a parallel here to what we just discussed, because if the United States is saying to Iran, you do A, B, and C, or else there'll be war, it's the exact same message to Hamas. You committed to dismantle your military structure. You committed to a demilitarized Gaza Strip. You committed to relinquish political power of Gaza. All that is in the deal. All that is in the UN Security Council resolution. And it's clear Hamas doesn't want to do that.
Right.
And so one option is, okay, like with Iran, they don't do what they're supposed to do, what they committed to do. Therefore, Israel gets a green light to go in and finish the job.
Right.
But I think what Trump's preference is to utilize Hamas's best friends in the Sunni Muslim world, which is Turkey and Qatar, and to pressure them, and they will do it for their own reasons, pressure Hamas to follow through on the deal. Now, that's going to be very hard lifting. It worked to help get the original deal. Can it help now with the implementation of the ceasefire, with the demilitarization? That's a harder act. It's quite possible, you quoted Clausewitz before, yes? It's quite possible maybe Israel has to do a bit of a military operation, and then that'll provide the impetus for maybe more successful diplomacy, because it'll be a way to get a new ceasefire. Either way, you're right, the jury is out on this issue. It's clear Hamas does not want to demilitarize, does not want to disarm itself, and therefore it's either Israel will have to act. No amount of international peacekeepers is going to disarm Hamas. That is only Israel's job.
Right. And of course, Ambassador Regev, Ron, is mentioning the role of Turkey and Qatar. Israel is not comfortable with those two nations, key sponsors of Hamas, having such a key role in the Gaza Strip. And I'm sure Prime Minister Netanyahu is expressing those concerns to the Trump administration. How receptive would he find President Trump be to those concerns, considering what he admits, what President Trump says, his close personal relationship with the leaders of those countries?
I don't know how receptive Trump will be to those concerns. I think that that Netanyahu might have a hard sell going in. Trump has, he's friends with Erdogan. They have a good, friendly relationship. Qatar famously, as soon as he became president again in his second term, offered and he accepted, a refurbished or a brand new Air Force One, a tricked out Air Force One. Those are the kinds of things that Netanyahu has to deal with, and those are. I think in this case, Mark is exactly right in that the pressure on Hamas works differently here, because with Iran, that would involve American involvement. I think that Trump would be reluctant to do that. With Hamas, that just involves giving Israel a green light, no American troops on the ground, and that kind of pressure could work with Hamas, and also, as Mark points out, in terms of getting Turkey and Qatar to bring Hamas down to the final, to accepting its disarmament. On the other hand, Qatar is one thing, Turkey is completely another. Erdogan has kind of expressed fantasies of an Ottoman revival. He wants to reestablish Turkish presence throughout the Middle East, Turkish influence throughout the Middle East. And, Avigdor Lieberman a few weeks ago put this very succinctly. The minute there's even like a Turkish teacher in a school in Gaza, it crosses a red line because it establishes international acceptance of a Turkish stake in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I think that presents such a thorny future. The minute that like one Turkish soldier is injured in a conflict, that happens, some kind of mistake happens, you've got a volatile president who's committed to defending his honor in terms of Erdogan. That could lead to very, very ugly places. I think Netanyahu recognizes that, and that he's going to try and make that argument when he meets with during his meeting now with Trump.
And Mark, in terms of actually Gaza, there are sort of leaks of plans which one suspect could come, for example, from the Qatari or Turkish camps. Hamas will give up some of its weapons, but keep some smaller weapons. There'll be partial disarmament, and so reconstruction could begin. Let's talk about the role of Qatar in particular and their growing influence in Washington and elsewhere, and really the kind of challenge it is for Israel.
So Qatar is a challenge for Israel, but Qatar wants to remain in President Trump's good books. And they helped get the first ceasefire, and maybe for their own egotistic national interest reasons are willing to put pressure on Hamas. The jury's still out. We have to wait to see what happens. Same with the Turks, right? To what extent will they use the leverage they have over Hamas in a positive way to score brownie points with the United States, maybe to get the F-35s and so forth? And that's what the situation is. It's clear to me, though, that that's heavy lifting. Hamas will not want to disarm. Their model, it's very clear to me, Hamas's model is the Hezbollah model before 2024. They're happy for there to be some formal official government that's not them, but they want to be the power behind the scenes. And to be the power behind the scenes, they need the people on the ground with guns.
Right.
You said so they can partially disarm. Yeah. Partially disarming is like being a little bit pregnant. It's the minute they are on the ground with guns, they will control what happens in Gaza. And Israel and the United States, we have to insist on the fulfillment of their own commitment that they disarm.
Well, certainly, disarming Hamas, demilitarizing Gaza. The mission seems to be clear, and of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu will have to stand firm on that point as this process goes ahead. Ambassador Mark Regev, Ron Campius there in Washington, D.C., thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief.
Pleasure.
And now a final word. The main subjects of Prime Minister Netanyahu's meeting with President Trump were, of course, Iran and Gaza. But there is another issue of a more long-term nature that needs to be urgently discussed between these two leaders: the future of U.S. military aid to Israel. The 10-year Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, that set the amount of that aid at some $3.8 billion annually is due to expire in 2028. Discussions on the terms of its renewal have already begun between top security officials from both countries. Last month, Netanyahu said that he would like to see that aid gradually taper down to nothing over the course of the next decade. He cited the need to wean Israel away from dependence on foreign sources for its military needs by developing its own domestic defense industries, a goal he says was proven necessary since the October 7th attack by the diplomatic pressure Israel came under from some of its key suppliers of weaponry, including at one point by the Biden administration. But surely the Prime Minister's statement also reflects a realization that even in the conservative Republican camp, there are growing voices urging an isolationism that includes cutting back on aid to Israel, despite the fact that most of that funding is returned to the U.S. via the purchase of American-made military hardware. Now, certainly as an ideal, Israel should rely as much as possible on its own capabilities for its security needs. But it must also be realistic. A small nation of under 10 million people with limited natural resources will never have the industrial manufacturing base needed to build the big-scale weaponry such as submarines, massive bomber jets, and a quickly replenishable missile arsenal that it will need to face potential threats. Israel, for all its renowned military prowess, will need outside help to secure its future, and the U.S. is the only reliable ally that can provide that assistance. The answer then is not simply to aim for a cutoff of American aid, but a new approach that reframes the security relationship between the countries as a collaborative strategic partnership, one which benefits the defense sectors of both nations. For example, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies proposes that the current MOU be replaced by a U.S.-Israel Strategic Partnership Agreement, one in which U.S. military aid be conditioned on Israel spending at least 4.5% of its GDP on defense spending, commit itself to purchasing some $1 billion in American-made military hardware beyond any U.S. funding it receives, and investing hundreds of millions more in joint U.S.-Israel military research and development of efforts. Of course, there are many details to be worked out, as well as possible new diplomatic agreements that could be reached, committing Israel to assist the U.S. in helping to secure American interests in this region in the years ahead. But one thing is clear. Given the changing political and geopolitical environments, Israel can no longer simply take for granted the continuation of current levels of U.S. military aid. It must find new formulas and new approaches in order to ensure the future of its one utterly essential security alliance with a foreign power, namely Israel's special relationship with the United States of America. Thank you for joining ILTV Security Brief. In a first-of-its-kind move, Prime Minister Netanyahu has signed orders to revoke the Israeli citizenship and deport 2 Israeli citizens convicted of serious terror attacks against Israelis. The decision marks the first implementation of a law passed in February 2023, allowing the state to strip convicted terrorists of citizenship and deport them if they received payments from the Palestinian Authority for so-called pay-for-slay payments. The 2 men are Mahmoud Ahmad, sentenced to 23 years in prison for shooting attacks against Israeli soldiers and civilians, and Hussein al-Halsi, sentenced in 2016 to 18 years for stabbing an elderly woman in Jerusalem's Armona Natziv neighborhood. In a statement, Netanyahu said both men were rewarded by the Palestinian Authority for their criminal acts, and described the move as a clear message of deterrence. He said many more cases are already in the pipeline. According to reports, Ahmed, who was released from prison in 2024, will be deported immediately, while al-Halsi will be deported upon completing his sentence. Israeli media report that they are expected to be deported to the Gaza Strip, though the Prime Minister's office has not confirmed the destination.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog is in Australia this week, paying tribute to the victims of the Bondi Beach attack. During his trip, Herzog visited the Jewish community and the location of the massacre. But the Israeli president was met with massive crowds of violent protesters. The demonstration did not once focus on the tens of thousands murdered in Iran, for example. Instead, they took to the streets to protest the arrival of Herzog in Australia. ILTV's Devo Klein has the full story.
This was the scene at the Moriah College Jewish School in Sydney. Speaking to students, waving Israeli and Australian flags, Israeli President Isaac Herzog inspired the Jews of Australia with a touching visit. The purpose of the visit was to be with the community in mourning after the Bondi Beach at the Hanukkah celebration when ISIS-inspired shooters took the lives of 15 Jewish people. And this was the scene yesterday, a touching ceremony where President laid wreaths alongside his wife, paying his final respects to the victims. But this was the scene outside. Pro-Palestinian Australians saw fit to bombard the president on a trip meant to show solidarity and inspire a community in mourning, claiming Herzog was complicit in the deaths of Palestinians in Gaza. The death toll in Iran continues to climb, and uncertainty due to internet blackout is allowing the regime to execute its civilians. But for the people of Iran, not a single flag or chant was in sight. The Bondi Beach attack still stands as the most horrific attack committed on Australian soil in decades, and instead of mourning together with the community, police were forced to separate protesters and mourners.
What you saw last night was New South Wales police being confronted multiple times by a section of that crowd intent on disturbing and disrupting police lines. Now, what we can say today that we couldn't say yesterday is that we had concurrently 7,000 mourners down at the International Convention Centre who were mourning the horrible events of the 14th of December with the President of Israel. New South Wales Police had to keep both protesters and mourners separate so that, as disturbing as the scenes were last night on the news, they weren't even worse as a result of thousands of people clashing together on the streets of Sydney.
Several protesters were arrested in the clashes, and the empathy of the Australian people proved once again to be selective and biased.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard, coming to you live from Israel with the biggest headlines from across the region. U.S. President Donald Trump set a deadline for talks with Iran to conclude within the next month as a major American military buildup continues. The aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford and its strike group are now heading towards Iran, a deployment that could take up to 4 weeks, a timeline that appears to align with Trump's diplomatic ultimatum. Speaking outside the White House, the U.S. president urged Iran to make a deal, but warned that if they don't, the U.S. military is ready. Listen to this.
What can Iran do to avoid attack? Give us the deal that they should have given us the first time. If they give us the right deal, we won't do that. But, you know, historically, they haven't done that. I will say they want to talk, but so far they do a lot of talking and no action.
When are those talks, Mr. President?
They've already started.
Do you want regime change in Iran?
Well, it seems like that would be the best thing that could happen. For 47 years, they've been talking and talking and talking. In the meantime, we've lost a lot of lives while they talk, and legs blown off, arms blown off, faces blown off. It's been going on for a long time, so let's see what happens. In the meantime, we have tremendous power has arrived, and additional power, as you know, another carrier is going out shortly. So we'll see it out. If we could get it settled for once and for all, that would be good.
A crowd of approximately 250,000 people gathered in Munich, Germany for a major demonstration against the Islamic Republic's regime, marked by calls for leadership change and support for exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi during his visit to the Munich Security Conference. Here's what Pahlavi had to say.
The Iranian people are in full revolt, and the regime is at the weakest it's ever been. It's on the verge of collapse. It's a matter of time before this regime goes. My point, however, is that the world needs to understand, including the U.S. administration, that whether or not the Western world intervenes, our fight will continue and the regime will collapse anyway. The only question is, at what price do the Iranian people can regain their freedom? If they have the support, there will be less casualties and it will happen quicker.
President Donald Trump's Board of Peace is moving from concept to action, with its first leaders meeting set for Tuesday in Washington. President Trump is expected to unveil a multi-billion-dollar Gaza reconstruction plan and lay out details for a UN-authorized stabilization force in the Strip, a key component of his post-war framework. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar will represent Israel at the meeting that will also include Indonesia, who recently announced they are committing 8,000 troops to the Gaza stabilization force. Meanwhile, European democracies are reportedly keeping their distance after expressing concern about the board's structure and its relationship to the United Nations. Now, the IDF says its troops shot and killed a Palestinian man who crossed the Gaza ceasefire line in the northern strip. According to the military, the terror operative crossed the ceasefire line and approached soldiers from the Gaza Division's Northern Brigade in a manner that posed an immediate threat, proceeding to open fire and eliminate the suspect. During a visit to Rafah in southern Gaza, IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir said the destruction of all of Hamas's frontline battalions is an unprecedented accomplishment, but stressed the war's core objective remains unfinished: the full demilitarization of Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has responded to an inquiry from President Herzog's office, insisting that Netanyahu did not ask President Trump to speak out for a presidential pardon during his White House meeting last week. Herzog is stressing the rule of law, saying any decision on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's request for a presidential pardon in his trial will be independent, despite public pressure from U.S. President Trump. The statement followed remarks by Trump at the White House, where he repeated his call for clemency, an appeal he first made in writing last November. And that's all for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. You can scan the QR code on your screen to download our WhatsApp channel to get constant updates throughout the day directly to your phone from ILTV. We will see you next time.
I don't understand. Like a month ago, we encouraged people in Iran to go outside to fight for themselves against the regime that you're trying to negotiate with.
And save.
Like, what do you mean Iran wants to make a deal? On behalf of who? The 40,000 people that they just executed in the streets?
The people of Iran are begging Trump not to negotiate. You have somebody who has their whole life ahead of them that's exhausted. For them, taking their life was literally freeing themselves.
Yeah.
And the message is to you, hey, we're waiting. Welcome back, everybody, to The Quad here from our Jerusalem studios with my wonderful co-host, Sagan Fakheri, who is the head of the Persian press desk at the JCFA and an analyst on Iran. Welcome back, Sagan.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here again.
Well, we're always happy to have you back, especially because every week we seem to be discussing Iran. Will he? Won't he? What's going to happen? Whilst we all hold our breaths, also the Iranian diaspora, also people here at Israel, what will happen? What do the Iranians have to say about these new negotiations? Take a look.
We talk about the nuclear program only. We put that into consideration. Regarding the zero uranium enrichment, it's outside the talks, outside negotiations. The enrichment is our own right, and it will continue. And even if when they attacked us, they couldn't destroy this enrichment because they cannot destroy it through attacking and bombardment. The other hand, regarding the missiles is something that is defensive. We cannot talk about defensive matters, not now and not in the future.
So what exactly can we talk about? We can't talk about enrichment. They can continue enriching. Okay. We can't talk about ballistic missiles because it's their right. So what on earth is going on in the negotiations? What are the American red lines, and do they align with our red lines? Sagan, you are the expert here, apart from Emily, of course. What is your view on what's going on right now with these negotiations?
Okay, so one thing we know and understand about how the Islamic regime works is that they are the masters of propaganda.
Yeah.
They will go outside, they will come to the UN, they will come to negotiations, suited up, real nice and we're ready to talk, we're gonna have this communication with the West.
Diplomatic reason.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you see in Tehran, you see in the plaza, in the square, you see them keeping this war and threatening Israel and threatening why do you care? You have negotiations with America. Well, every time Israel is the place they want to put attention on. And it's always like, no, they didn't destroy anything, and we're so strong, and we're this, and we're that. And like,
they try
wake up.
They try
like,
to spin it.
Your people, like the people in Iran, are refusing to acknowledging the fact that the West is gonna like come to an arrangement with and I'm like, so I don't understand it, and it's all propaganda, and nobody actually knows what's gonna happen after that. If they're gonna come to a conclusion, if there's gonna be a peace, like ceasefire or anything in that matter, or we should wait and just have a look on the situation of the citizens, because I don't understand. Like a month ago, we encouraged people in Iran to go outside to fight for themselves against the regime that you're trying to like negotiate with
and save, essentially. Let me ask you one question, because I've read this, I've seen it, and I want to know if it's true. Is it true that there's cracks at the moment in the IRGC, that people are defecting, that people are leaving? Do you think that's true, or is it just wishful thinking on our part?
No, I think it's happening. Maybe we don't talk about it that much, and maybe the regime is trying like to silence it out, and for sure they're trying to. But we have a diplomat that says, I'm not working with them anymore, and he asked for shelter in Switzerland. So I'm like, so there's so many things happening. I'm like, and people are fleeing Iran and trying to move assets and like money and everything to other parts of the world and try to save themselves. I think there's this paranoia that is very justified.
For the regime.
Yeah, for the regime people, yeah. By like, they are afraid that the West is gonna like come in and like the regime is gonna fall. I think that what I said, propaganda, is like they show something outside, and inside I think like it's getting really crumbled. And
I hope so. Emily, last night there's reports that there were more demonstrations, or in the last few days there's been kind of a resurgence, maybe again. Maybe that's just us. Do you think that Trump's tactic at the moment is waiting to push people to do more, to have more defections, to get the Iranian people to do the work that he doesn't want to do because he doesn't want troops on the ground, or to show them that they've got something to replace their regime with? I think what I keep hearing from the people that I know in the White House is, well, he doesn't think that they can be replaced smoothly. It's not going to be an easy thing. And so do you think that Trump's game is, let's just wait and wait, because he talks about waiting. Let's see how much more of the dirty work the Iranian people can do against their own regime, and then we'll come in at the end to kind of finish the job?
I don't think that has anything to do with it, actually. I think that Trump is in his own world where he wants to make a deal and be able to say that he made a deal, or it could be that the whole thing is posturing, the same way that we saw before the 12th Day War in June. We saw very similar behavior. We see more and more and more assets being moved to the Middle East every single day from the United States. So there's by no means is a strike off the table. I don't think that Trump wants or expects the Iranian people to do more. And if he did, then he's seriously delusional, because, I mean, having 20, 30, 40,000 people be massacred by their own regime in the span of a few days, immediately after the president of the United States send a message saying help is on its way, like, you've done enough, and not in a good way, not yet, at least. I hope that he does. I hope that he moves forward with something for the sake of the Iranian people. But I mean, what we've seen already is catastrophic. And you're exactly right about the propaganda. I mean, if there's one war they know how to win, it's the war of narratives, despite the fact that it could be completely false. But they're good at painting those narratives in the West. The funny part is that the Iranians don't believe it.
They don't buy it.
But in the West, people keep believing it, because to most of us in the West, it sounds very conspiratorial. But that's the reality of this regime. I mean, we're talking about a regime that blew up a Cinema Rex, that shot down a commercial airliner, PS-752, all in order to frame someone else unsuccessfully. So this is what they do, you know? We can't expect that to change. And that's part of the reason I don't think we can see any kind of actual reform. It has to actually be regime change.
No, a scorpion will always be a scorpion, and that's what I think people don't seem to understand. It's like Hamas. What are you going to do? They're going to disarm? Really? It's their whole raison d'etre. That's why they exist. It's the same with this regime. But meanwhile, Trump is telling the world that they have all the time to negotiate. Watch this.
A deal doesn't look like it's been reached yet.
How long are you willing to wait?
It can be reached. Well, you have to get in position. We have plenty of time. If you remember Venezuela, we waited around for a while, and we're in no rush. We have, very good talks going with Iran. We have very good talks going with Russia and Ukraine. We're doing a lot of good talking, and I think we had the results today were with Iran. It was a meeting. We're going to meet again early next week. And they want to make a deal, Iran, as they should want to make a deal. They know the consequences if they don't.
I mean, no nuclear weapons. Yeah, I mean, why not? Yeah. Forget the ballistic missiles that could destroy a country. And meanwhile...
I'm sorry, I just have to say, even negotiating with this regime, and he keeps referring, Iran wants this, Iran wants that. First of all, they're not the legitimate representation of Iranians. They're not. It's an illegitimate regime. So,
like Maduro.
Personally, I'm biased, but personally, I have a problem with him even saying Iran, because they don't speak for the Iranian people. Like, what do you mean Iran wants to make a deal? On behalf of who? The 40,000 people that they just executed in the streets?
Exactly.
Like, even the message of negotiations is an immoral message at this time. Like, I don't understand what he thinks he's doing when Iran, when the Islamic Republic has been very clear.
The only thing I can think of is that he's waiting, he's biding time to get everything here.
He said get into position.
The region. But meanwhile, like you said, Sugan, the people of Iran are begging Trump not to negotiate. Watch this.
If you're watching this, then I'm not around anymore. If you don't know, I'm from Iran. And a massacre happened in the past few weeks by our government, which is more like a bandit group. More than 40,000 people died, killed, massacred. I want to make this video to send a message to America and to the West in general. Tomorrow, on Friday, President Trump is going to make a deal with this regime. I mean, he told us to keep protesting, and we did it. We trust him. To make a deal with this regime is to betray all those people who died.
Exactly. It's just heartbreaking. Bellamy, is the West not getting it? Or does Trump playing a game? What do you think?
I genuinely don't think the West is getting it. And we've seen a lot of dead bodies in the past few months from what people have been posting, but this video has been haunting me.
Why?
And specifically, his messaging went to a point about he was done. It was enough.
Did he commit to
Yes, gone through
Yeah,
He did.
He did.
Yeah.
Stop.
Shortly after
So this was literally his call out to say, like, I'm leaving, but you need to do something. You told the people to go out onto the streets. They did. They opened the door to what you should be doing right now. And the fact that it's not just Trump, it's not just an administration, it's the people in the West that are so silent about what's actually going on. For 2 years, and over 2 years, all we have heard about are children in Gaza, and we are committing a genocide, and we're doing this. But when you actually have an actual genocide that's currently going on, that has been going on for 47 years against their own people, behind a curtain, behind a wall, and you have somebody who has their whole life ahead of them that's exhausted, that's done enough, that for them taking their life was literally freeing themselves. And the message is to you, hey, we're waiting.
Yeah.
He wasn't waiting anymore.
It's tragic. I can't, and it's all, the thing is that it's the young people of Iran.
Yep.
They're the ones who are on the front lines of this war, and they're the ones that people in the West are ignoring because the enemy is the wrong enemy for the sensibilities and the paradigm that the young people around the world have made for themselves, the lie and the zombie ideology that they live in. It's just, it's just, it's almost like, we had this Gaza war, we had these 2 years, and now God knows how long this is going to last. It's like a tale of two wars, And nobody's connecting the dots of these two wars who have the same enemy because, of course, it's the wrong enemy for these zombies in the West. Before we jump in, a quick invitation. The 2026 JNS International Policy Summit is coming up this April, April 15th through to the 17th, once again at the Waldorf Astoria in Jerusalem. I'll be there, and I really hope you'll join us too. You can visit jns-summit.org to register and to see the speaker lineup. It's an exceptional group this year. I look forward to meeting you in Jerusalem this April. And on that note, we can talk about phase 2 in Gaza, which again, people are completely blind about the fact that Hamas, the terror organization that uses its own children as human shields, is not disarming. And yet we're being pushed into the second phase. And I mean, God knows what's going to happen. The Board of Peace, I think, convened this week or a couple of days ago.
Yeah. I don't know the exact date, but yeah.
Peace.
We don't know who's on it. We don't know what's on it. We just know what their agenda is and when it started, I think.
Just the way that everybody's ignoring the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic when he's saying, we're not going to give up uranium, and we're not going to give up this, and we're not going to give up that. In other words, we have nothing to negotiate. Listen to Khaled Mashal about the resistance.
هذا ينبغي ألا نقبله لأنه هذا إذا أعد السؤال الكبير عن أصل الصراع وأنه قضية احتلال وشعب يقاوم الاحتلال ومن حقه تقرير المصير والاستقلال، عند ذلك سؤال المقاومة يصبح طبيعيا، وسؤال سلاح المقاومة يصبح طبيعيا. إنه هذا فلسفة المقاومة. نحن طالما هناك احتلال هناك مقاومة. المقاومة حق للشعوب تحت الاحتلال، هي جزء من القانون الدولي والشرائع السماوية.
You love his eyeliner.
Okay, first of all, shocker. He's in that disgusting Al Jazeera forum. Where was it? In Doha, of course. Of course. Where else is going to be in the Viper's Den? He's basically completely unrepentant. He's the only one left, really, with a name recognition.
Yeah. Why is he even breathing?
Why is he talking? There? I mean, this guy is a mass murderer. I mean,
and a billionaire.
And a billionaire. That's why he's living in a 7-star hotel in Doha. And there he is, whilst Hamas, who apparently have still got a very strong foothold in Gaza, unfortunately, are using ambulances to smuggle weapons. So, I mean, look, we've been here before, right? This is not new. They've used ambulances before. They've used medics before. I love it when all these idiots on X are like, they've killed 400 doctors, all terrorists. They've killed 300 journalists, all terrorists. You know, what else? Anything else? Actors and dancers and violinists, all...
They're all...
Well, most of them were actors. When you act as a journalist, you're an actor. It's a really good one, let me tell you that.
You should know, Zoran.
Listen.
So I forgot to say, Zoran is star of the Tehran series. Watch her there.
Yeah. So as someone who, because of my job, like in Tehran, I was like really trying to understand how Islam works. And it works like this, that you can say anything you want. You can have any mask on just to keep the ideology of Islam going.
Taqiyya, they call it, no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this is like they don't care. It could be a hospital, it could be an ambulance, and you don't see it only in Gaza. And I'm sorry for taking it back to Iran, but
no, you're right.
Like it happened in Gaza like a year ago, let's say. In Iran, it happened like a week ago.
What happened?
That they entered hospitals, shooting people in their beds and killing them.
They also were documented using ambulances, unmarked ambulances to
the ambulance, like
the protests.
The Basij are hiding inside the ambulances,
Same
and it's
playbook.
it's crazy, and it's the same thing. And the people who don't see that this person is calling for a weaponized resistance. I mean, okay, tomorrow, let me tell you that in the future, if you're letting like this happen and people are supporting this, tomorrow it will happen in New York.
Exactly.
It will happen in New York.
It's guerrilla tactics 101, which so many people know absolutely nothing about. But when you also I come from a country that was trained to do things like that by the exact same people that live off of that ideology. So to me, when I speak to a Westerner and they're like, there's no such thing as tequila. What do you mean? They're lying. I'm going, what are you talking about? You're too busy watching Real Housewives of something and you think that's more entertaining and that's more educational, brain rot, than to actually listen to people that are telling you that there's something that is very off that's going on. It's not a conspiracy. People are literally in sleeper cells, even in the West, and they have no clue who's around them. But no, it's Islamophobia. No.
Yeah. Well, I noticed that the way that I mean, obviously it was in Arabic, but the way that he described about resistance is something that we've heard a lot of in the past couple of years, even before that, but especially in the last couple of years, this concept that you have a right to resistance when you're an occupied people. There is no basis in any international law for this argument. You are never permitted under any circumstances to attack or kill civilians because you are occupied. That doesn't exist. It's a fantastical notion that keeps getting repeated by people like Francesca Albanese and people like Khaled Mashal, incidentally, both of them at the same conference, Al Jazeera. And it's not true. It's simply not true. There is no right. That's not how international law works, even if you're occupied, and even if that occupation is illegal, which, by the way, this isn't, I would argue, but there is a debate over, whether an occupation is illegal or legal, also in this conflict. But the idea that gives someone a right to violence is insane. Otherwise, you would see people in Cyprus blowing people up all the time. That's not how it works.
But that's what Bellamy said. What message are you now giving to the world, to terrorists all around the world, when you say, look, you can start a war, you can massacre, you can rape, you can kill, you can kidnap, and then at the end of it, the person who started it, who obviously lost the war, can still rearm or can still keep their arms, like you say, Sagan. What is the message that you're giving? And Emily, you forgot one thing. You're never illegal on stolen land. Like Billie Eilish, Billie Chachmalog, as we say in Hebrew, she's such an intelligent woman that she made that really bold statement at the Grammys that now the tribe of the place in Malibu where she owns her $14 million house are claiming it back. Yeah. You idiot. You idiot. I can't with these people.
It's the same thing because it's constant virtue signaling. Because I remember a few years back when, everybody, especially during COVID, this was when people are on Skid Row hungry, not like people aren't in mental hospitals and institutions and being taken care of because they were using those for undocumented, I'm supposed to say, you're an illegal alien. And I can say that.
Well, you can say, but you went through the whole process.
I went through the whole process
of being a legal immigrant of the United States.
From student visa to work visa to EB1 green card to citizenship naturalized. And what upsets me more than anything else is the fact that since I was 17 years old when I landed in the US, I'm a guest. Until I swear and take my oath, I'm a guest. And I also pay taxes. So quite frankly, I don't care for somebody to be kept in a mental institution. And then you have these celebrities going, but we should just open the doors. And then what did they do years ago? They put them in buses and sent them to Martha's Vineyard. Apparently, you can welcome everybody. Open your door, just not mine.
Yes. Yeah. NIMBY, as we say, not in my backyard. And that is the hypocrisy of the progressives. And I just had to get that Billie Eilish thing on because I just love
Listen, I love her.
Sued.
I love Billie.
That
when I was young,
of course,
she was amazing. She was so bold. She was like going against everything in the industry.
Yes, the patriarchy.
So good. Until bro, you were homeschooled, and I'm pro homeschooling when it's matching you.
Until you
probably you didn't learn history or anything else. And let me tell you that one thing. And I'm not I grew up in a Muslim state. Iran is like the Islamic state and country, and people are sick of it, okay? But let me tell you, I'm into any religion as long as you're good, as long as you don't interfere in my life. But let me tell you, Muhammad, when he did the hijrah, when he moved from Mecca to Medina, he killed anyone who wasn't going to believe in whatever he believed.
Especially the Jews, who wouldn't accept.
The tribes there.
He wouldn't accept the words, and that got murdered and massacred.
Yeah. But this is Mamdani's argument for anti-ICE executive orders.
Yeah, but he didn't. Yeah.
What is it?
That's what he said. in his press conference. He literally said
that he was an immigrant. He was an immigrant.
That his reason for this was because in Islam, the story of Muhammad teaches us about the hijrah, and the hijrah was to welcome the stranger.
Yes, exactly. Except that you got massacred.
About that.
With the sword, they massacred so many.
Yeah.
And Mandani is the same type of new age moron, whatever you call it, as Billie Eilish, but even worse because he knows exactly what he's doing. And meanwhile, 15 people got frozen to death on the streets of New York because as mayor, you have one job, to keep your people safe. And you were too busy meddling in international politics that you know nothing about or have absolutely no legitimacy to talk about, and you let your own people die during a storm, one of the worst storms that happened to New York. So that's that. Okay, moving on to our very favorite segment, Scumbag of the Week. We have so many scumbags, so little time. Bellamy, which one is yours this week?
Mine is not just the African National Congress, not just the government that is South Africa, but specifically Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga, who spoke at the 47th commemoration of the IRGC in South Africa.
Oh, they had a party?
Yes, on February 6th at the Menlyn Hotel in Pretoria. And funny enough, it's always in Pretoria, the same place where during apartheid, they would take you as a political prisoner and throw you off the roof.
Oh,
so funny how that goes, because I think we have a neighbor that loves to throw people off the roof, but it's so disgusting when I say to people constantly, you don't understand what a massive red flag South Africa is. No, well, what did they do? But there's Nelson Mandela, but you should feel it in a different way. Yes, but I grew up in something that I don't understand how I ran away from it. I think there's something wrong with me because I should be chanting in the street that I'm not free until Palestine is free. And I quite frankly should be agreeing with the regime. What's wrong with me?
There's a lot wrong with you. I mean,
just not that.
Apparently. You stepped out of the line of your South Africa education and became a Jew.
Yeah.
I mean, just for that, you should be...
They should be stoned to death.
Exactly. Anyway.
I find it repulsive as well that there are children that are in the streets believing the same kind of indoctrination at the southern tip of a continent that has nothing to do with the Middle East.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh dear. Well, so many. I love you're bringing in the South African angle, and it's important because they're such enablers legally and in so many other forums, and they've become really the capital of these evil bastards. That's what's happened to South Africa. Emily, who's your scumbag this week?
Well, my scumbag, I was going to do the whole Al Jazeera forum, but I guess I'll hone in on one person specifically.
It's always
hard because there were so many scumbags.
The story of one.
Al Jazeera itself is a scumbag.
Yes.
I mean, how can I choose?
Yes.
But anyway, this week was the Al Jazeera media conference held in Doha, and we saw, as I mentioned earlier, Francesca Albanese and also Khaled Mashal and also Aragchi, the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic. So it's just a whole group of winners. I think we have a clip of Francesca, if we can play that.
Instead of stopping Israel, most of the world has armed, giving it political excuses, political sheltering, economic and financial support. We now see that we, as a humanity, have a common enemy.
We have a common enemy. I wonder who she's referring to when she talks about a common enemy the same way Adolf Hitler did. But that's tended to be expected from Francesca Albanese because that's how she talks. That's what she's done. That's her track record, and that's what she truly believes. We saw just not too long ago she was retweeting people saying that Jews were evil incarnate.
Yes.
Israel. Israel is evil incarnate, not Jews, right? Anyway, that's Francesca. You're my scumbag of the week. Many other weeks as well, but this week in particular, you deserve it.
She joined the flotilla.
She should.
Probably will.
And we could sync it. That would be a savor to the world. Like super crazy.
Nazi rhetoric.
Nazi rhetoric. Well, you know, maybe her grandfather was Mussolini. I'm beginning to think.
I mean, she sounds like it.
She really does. And look how he ended up, naked on the streets of Italy, being dragged and everybody shouting shame. So we can only dream. Okay. Sogan, Who is
I was
yo?
waiting for that.
Yeah.
Listen, last time I enjoyed it so much. I was like going directly to Khamenei, but okay. This time, my scumbag has a chance to redeem themselves.
Really?
That's like, I'm so
redeemable scumbag.
Yeah, I'm into like forgiving people, some people. So exactly 1 month ago, today is February 9th. January 9th, the people of Iran were outside in the streets fighting for a future.
Yeah.
The US said they're gonna come, okay, whatever. But okay, let's say they're coming. Who should protect the people inside Iran? The Artesh. The Artesh is the National Army of Iran.
Artesh?
Artesh.
We don't hear that enough.
We don't hear that
Yes.
because Iran has two guards. Like they have the IRGC
that protects the regime.
Yeah, no, but it's like it functions as an army.
Okay.
They have everything: Air Force, Navy, like everything like you have, and the Quds and the Basij. We all know about that. And we have Artesh, which also has like the commando forces, the Navy, the Air Force, and their responsibility is to stand with the people of Iran. When your brothers and sisters, your families are getting massacred in the streets, you are not you're not like under Khamenei. You're with the people. You're with the people. You should defend your people and go and fight with them. And your guns should point the regime and the Basij and the whatever like oppressing forces they used, and not towards the people. And let me just, I don't know if you watched it, but like previous days, like just a few days before the protests, you saw people of the Artesh holding like signs, like lighting up Khamenei's picture. So where are you? And I know like some of them wanted, like they didn't want to cooperate with like the oppressing corps, but like, where are you? Like, you're so many people.
So are they armed? Are they resourced?
Yes. They're functioning.
So what
army.
you're saying is they are scared, I assume, of the IRGC.
Listen,
it's like you know what it's like, the Lebanese army and Hezbollah. Like you never know where one ends and the other one begins. Is it like that with the Artesh?
No.
They're a separate force.
Two separate, like organizations.
So you're like, where the hell are they?
Where are you?
That's a good point.
I just want to say, you have like maybe you don't have the trust of the people anymore, but you can gain it back. You can win the trust again. Just stand with the people and defend them when they're trying to protest and fight for their lives and for your lives.
Exactly.
Because you are the trash of the armies in Iran. So,
oh my God, some shade on the Artesh. Well, first of all, thank you for educating us. I did not understand that there was a separate kind of people's army that is absolutely not doing much. I understood that many people were defective.
It's the national, but you know.
Yeah, but I also didn't understand also what powers they have as opposed to the IRGC. I didn't realize it was a separate kind of jurisdiction.
Well, the IRGC also, that's why it's not the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, it's the Islamic Revolutionary
So
Guard.
they're fighting for Islamic jihad fundamentalism, and the People's Army are doing nothing because they're probably scared.
By the way, this is another reason why IRGC designation is not a problem. For so many years, they've used this as an excuse, claiming, oh, well, we don't know because it's a national army and it's a state actor. Yes, you do. It's totally fine. And as it is, terror designation exempts people who are mandatory, like if they're drafted, which sometimes people are drafted into the IRGC. So it's already exempted. All the excuses for the lack of designation.
Well,
nonsense.
That segues beautifully into my scumbag of the week, which is the EU. But not for the reasons you might think. But let's just say that better late than never, I think it was a week, 2 weeks ago, they finally prescribed the IRGC as a terrorist organization. Like, little late to the party, but better late than never. Okay, but the reason they are my scumbag this week is because Scott Bessent, for those of you who don't know, is the Treasury Secretary of the US, okay? He's basically the guy in charge of money. He's brilliant, actually, if you get a chance to look him up. He's so morally clear, so smart. He doesn't get emotional about anything, and people say such idiotic things at him, and he just like breaks down the arguments one by one. And he's doing a great job as a Treasury Secretary of the United States. But this week, he actually made quite an explosive claim that makes the EU my scumbag. And basically, he uncovered that the EU has been buying refined oil from India that Russia is selling to India. So hold on with me here. The EU have sanctioned Russia because of its aggressive war against Ukraine. The EU pretends it's on the side of Ukraine. Let's get more money to help the people of Ukraine who've been attacked by big, bad Russia. And at the same time, because they're worried about their energy resources, they have been buying sanctioned oil from Russia, but through India. So I guess it makes it okay. And so what Scott Bessent is saying is that Europe, the EU, is funding the war against itself because the EU is standing and helping and financing Ukraine, and yet they're also financing the other side. And that's how morally bankrupt they are, which we knew because of the way that they've been treating us over many years. It's a shame because we are an important trade partner. Israel and the EU are important trade partners. But when it comes to moral clarity or reasoning, I don't know what's happened to the EU, but I really applaud Scott Bessent for basically opening our eyes to what's really going on in the Ukraine-Russia war. And that is that essentially both sides are financing both sides of this war, which means that ending this, and maybe Trump, who people don't give him enough credit for the trade tariffs that he's putting, maybe there is a logic to the things that he's doing in terms of tariffs. But yes, the EU, for this very reason, you are my scumbag this week. Okay.
You know, they could avoid all that together if they just supported regime change in Iran and built a new Iran where they could have a better energy deal. Absolutely. And then they don't have to work with Russia anymore. But that would be like logical.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. We'll have to see.
They could.
We'll have to see.
I mean,
they can go that direction.
The thing about Iran is that with all of its incredible resources in crude oil, they don't really have refining capabilities. The EU could be that refining capability arm. And like you say, and not have to deal with other despots in Europe.
It would be a big middle finger to China and Russia both, which is both things I love.
Why don't you just let the Quad women run the world? Yes. And I could put my hand on fire that the result would be better. Just saying. Just saying. Okay. And on that note, heroes of the week. So on, let's start with your hero.
Okay. So as we talked, the internet came back in Iran, and we have seen like so many videos in the media, like it never ends, like so many evidence. Like this guy is Hamid Mahdavi, and he was a firefighter, and he was protesting during the protests, and he saw this man injured. I couldn't find his name. He came back, got him like on his back, tried to save him. He managed to save him, but he got shot.
Oh,
he got killed.
God. And he got shot the moment that he was saving this other person?
Maybe after, like after this video or something. Yeah. So the thing is that I found his Instagram, and I just want to read you his bio because it was like such a great bio. He made me cry, actually. So his bio actually says, being a firefighter is not just putting down fires. It's like having your family calm down, like trying to be a family man, trying to be like a good person, stuff, like saying like all the things. And then he said, but you don't have like time for yourself. And this is an example of a person who put everything at risk, his family, his life, and he saved a person trying to save his nation. And it's just one example of who are the Iranian people. And this is a great video, a great example. And as we see videos of Basij guys who get like attacked by the protesters, they run away. They don't care about their team fellows or the crew or team or whatever. But those people who don't know each other, they have each other's backs. And it's one of the most like moving, touching videos I've seen. And it's just
so sad.
Just
because they're standing for freedom, and these people are standing to what? To keep a murderous regime in place? They should all run away. like rats. Well, that is a wonderful, wonderful hero. It's a hero that gave up his life to save other people. Well,
Let's not forget that.
yes, let's never forget that, and we will keep talking about that here. Emily, who's your hero this week?
So my hero is the direct response to a prior scumbag, a repeat offender. Tucker Carlson.
Repeat offender.
So this week we saw that Tucker Carlson had a whole special about how awful it is for Christians in Israel, which is of course ridiculous because this is the one country in the Middle East where the Christian population is actually growing, the one where they're actually protected and their rights to practice their religion are not only protected under law, but defended as well in practice. So it's ridiculous to be singling out persecution of Christians in Israel in the first place. But Tucker Carlson has an agenda, obviously. And so that brings us to my hero this week, which is the U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee. He's done a lot of great things. I'm a big fan, but he called out Tucker Carlson very forcefully on social media and invited him to speak with Ambassador Huckabee himself directly about the status of Christians in Israel. As we know, Ambassador Huckabee is a big Christian Zionist, but Christian as well. And he is going to be speaking to Tucker Carlson, allegedly, about the situation of Christians in the Middle East. We'll see if Tucker actually moves forward with that interview. I hope he does, because I'm sure that Huckabee will really give it to him. But yes, Ambassador Huckabee, you're my hero this week for calling him out on this and for being the person to be willing to sit face to face and debunk this absolute nonsense that we keep hearing from Tucker Carlson. Or should I say Tucker Carlson?
Carlson. It's so true. He's such a great guy. He lives in Jerusalem, of course, because since the embassy moved in, he comes everywhere. I see him everywhere. He's part of life here.
Yeah.
And he's just so morally clear. And just to follow up on your point, and I'm sure that Huckabee is going to do a fantastic job against. I can't wait to see that, by the way. I mean,
one episode I'll watch.
Yes, I want to make T-shirts and do like a, how do they call it, a showing?
Watch party.
A launch party. Yeah, I'm going to do a launch party at my house. But just to refine your point, we had here the apostate prophet. And when we were talking about this subject, he said, you know, there's a list in the world where Christians are persecuted. Of course, we're not even on the list.
Yeah.
Why would we be? You thrive here as a Christian. North Korea, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, Eritrea, Nigeria, Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan, Sudan, India. No Israel. And so, yes, that hypocrisy of Tucker Carlson. I would have made him my scumbag, but I'm tired of giving this hater more attention because
mentioned the Board of Peace.
Yeah, exactly. I was looking at Bellamy. I was like, yeah, there.
No. Bellamy, you're right. Okay, who's your hero, dear?
For somebody that's so sick and tired of virtue signaling in Hollywood, my hero this week is Gessa Feldstein, whose real name is Mike Levy, and he got a Grammy. And this is actually how you should receive an award, because you're an artist. Take a look at this.
God, there he is. Thank God.
Who's this?
That's Gessa Feldstein.
Is he wearing a mask?
Yeah. That's his shtick.
What does he make?
He's a music producer and a DJ.
Nobody ever.
But no one knows what he looks like?
No, his name is Mike Levy.
It's a 40-year-old French Jewish guy, Zionist, and keeps his mouth shut.
Cute. That's it.
Yes.
Sometimes that's enough.
Shut up. Shut up.
And he DJs around the world, and he's also a very well-known producer. He produced Lady Gaga's Abracadabra.
Yeah.
So that for me was a great way to send a very clear message. But knowing who Hollywood is, everybody kept saying, it's National Black History Month. Well, he's in blackface. No, he's not in blackface. What did you call Sia? Hairface? It's then that's going back and forth. He's literally just wearing a mask because his job is to produce music. So you gave him an award. He didn't say anything. He received it and he left. And there's a problem with that, apparently.
Of course, there's a problem with that because he didn't say something completely moronic about a conflict they know nothing about. Well, I'd never heard of him, but now I will certainly look him up, and I'm very curious to know what he actually looks like. Okay, My heroes this week are the Israeli bobsled team at the Winter Olympics who call themselves Shul Ruddings. For those of you who haven't seen, just watch this.
Get on up, it's bobsleigh time. Show runners, show land of milk and honey, prophets, kings, ancient olive trees, and psalms the cantor sings. Home of David, Moses, desert sand. No bobsled run from Haifa to the Dan. We crossed the Red Sea, beat Pharaoh's banner, lips a license, no. Hockey, yes we can. Show runnings, we're flying down the track. Whoa. Show runnings, ain't no holding us back. Whoa. Tel Aviv to Milano, ice beneath the sled. Pray a little faster, full speed ahead. Yalla, yeah. Let's go.
So I have to say the head of this team, the captain, is a really lovely guy called AJ Edelman, who I met a number of years ago. And a number of years ago, he had this vision. He got no support from Israel, from the Culture and Sports Ministry, no funding. He went, they thought he was nuts. It's like that movie Cool Runnings. They thought he was nuts, like Israeli bobsled team. He went, he had this vision, he recruited an incredible group of athletes, including a Druze athlete, I think one of the first to go to
the first Olympian.
The first Druze Olympian coming from Israel. Look how proud we have to be. And he set up this whole team. He raised the money himself. He slept on people's couches for years because he had this dream of creating this team. When I met him, it was way before October 7th. I thought, this guy's crazy, but he could actually, the crazy could really win. And I'm just so proud to see them there. And they've been through so much adversity. They were booed on the day that they came out. Then their hotel room was burgled. They stole all their things, their money, their passports, and equipment. They came up with the coolest bobsled. He must have gotten some really cool artists to do this. And we, the whole country, and I think the whole Jewish world, is really behind the Israeli bobsled team led by my friend AJ Edelman, a true visionary. And I really can't wait to see them winning. So they are my heroes this week. And this is how we do offense. Defense is crying about people attacking us. Offense is saying, you know what, you're going to boo us, you're going to steal from us. You know what our response is? We're going to win. That is what we need all to be doing, and not, leaning into like, oh, poor us, feel sorry for us. And on that note, I say goodbye with my friends here until another week, and we pray for the liberation of the people of Iran. We pray for regional peace, whatever that means. We pray for quiet, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Today, we're joined by Eliyahu Kleinman, who works closely with overseas buyers navigating the Israeli real estate market. With so many foreigners investing from abroad, we wanted to talk about the most common mistakes that buyers make, and just as importantly, the opportunities that exist in the Israeli market right now. Eliyahu, thank you so much for joining us today. Pleasure to have you here again. You work with many international buyers. From your experience, what are the most common mistakes that foreigners make when buying property here in Israel?
So basically, there are two main mistakes that we see the clients are doing. First of all, they're assuming that Israel is another star at the American flag, and they think that the Israeli real estate market is like America or any other place in the world. So when you start assuming things in life and you don't really understand how the process works, how the market works, speaking with the professionals like attorneys who specialize working with the international clients, realtors as us, mortgage brokers, and so first of all, that's the number one mistake, because we're here to protect you as a buyer. And the second thing, that when people look in a deal, look at the price, and they don't look in the big picture. Or what are my guarantees? Who is the builder? And there are so many things that need to be discussed, that it's not only about the price. You need to see the big picture, that eventually what you're buying is what you're going to get. So I think those are the main two things that really to protect the buyer and avoiding making mistakes.
Now, how important is planning? I mean, anytime you're buying a property, you need to plan in advance, but how important is that for an overseas buyer?
First of all, ask yourself, why do I want to buy? Why did I left my contact information about the purchasing in Israel? Once you understand the why, planning your budget, planning if you want to make aliyah, don't make aliyah, but plan your timeline, and really understanding the full picture, as I said before making any decision.
Now, right now in the Israeli market, there are a lot of opportunities. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening here in Israel, opportunities that may exist for foreign purchasers?
So let's not forget that we are after 2 years, almost 3 years of war, hostages, high interest. Now it's a buyer's market. And so people ask me, okay, what does it mean to be in a buyer's market? So there are main three things. The first one is price. You can get a better price to be negotiated with the seller. Second are the terms. If it's the terms of the deal, the payment plan, index, upgrades in the apartments. And the third thing is that when you come to purchase something, you're not in a rush that the apartment will be taken tomorrow. You have the time actually to choose the apartment, to choose the property that will be good for you, because there are days when it's a seller's market, and it happens a lot, that a client is overseas, it comes the next day, and it says, look, the apartment, either the price went up or the apartment is sold. So definitely today it's a buyer's market. We don't know for how long it's going to stay. But Hashem, now we feel after the war, hostages are back. We feel the prosperity. And I really believe that if someone wants to purchase an apartment in Israel, that's a very good timing for him now. And that's why we're here, to give you the best service and the best deal that suits you as a buyer.
Sounds like it's actually a really good time to enter the Israeli real estate market. But I do want to ask you, before I let you go, if there's someone watching who is interested in purchasing property here in Israel, what advice would you have for them?
Speak with professionals, do your homework, build your team to make this process. It's not an easy process, but if you work with the right professionals and you communicate with them, we're here to make it much smoother and enjoyable.
And you're here to streamline, you guys work to streamline all of those things that you mentioned, the common pitfalls, not working with the professionals, and the different obstacles that may come up in purchasing a property, right?
As I said, it's about communication and culture and understanding. Once you try to, not going by the book, so eventually, we heard a lot of people saying, look, I purchased an apartment in Israel, but it's not what I've been told. Because when you try to do things not in the right way, there will be surprises. As I said, it's not like buying abroad. But nonetheless, a good time to buy, right? It is a good time to buy because smart investors and smart buyers know when everyone is quiet and when it's a buyer's market, that's the time to buy. Because when prices are going up and it's a seller's market and everything, is there, so you're going to get less for your money, or you're going to be your position is weaker.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Sorry to cut you off there. Eliyahu, you can learn more about buying property and working with Eliyahu here with his professional consultation to make sure that your investment is planned, protected, and, of course, strategic from day one. Feel free to scan the QR code to get in touch.
And in exciting news, you're invited to join us for the next episode of One-on-One presented by Israel Bonds and ILTV. This episode features Emily Austin, a rising voice in sports media known for speaking openly about her Jewish identity and her support for Israel. At a time when many choose to stay quiet, Emily has been willing to show up as herself and engage in candid and sometimes challenging conversations. Tune in Wednesday, February 18th at 9 p.m. Israel time or 2 p.m. Eastern time for this inspiring virtual program. Scan the QR code to register today.
Israel has formally joined President Trump's Board of Peace Initiative. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made the move official yesterday in Washington.
Visuals released after Netanyahu's meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio showed the Prime Minister signing Israel's accession to the board.
Netanyahu later said on social media he had officially joined the initiative. The board was authorized by a UN Security Council resolution in November and is linked to Trump's Gaza ceasefire framework, which began in October. Under the plan, the board is expected to help oversee Gaza's temporary governance and support reconstruction efforts. Its first meeting is set for February 19th in Washington. Indonesian President Subianto has now announced that he will attend. Earlier this week, Indonesia's military chief said the country is preparing to send 5,000 to 8,000 troops to Gaza under Trump's peace plan. The initiative currently lacks a Palestinian presence. Some Middle Eastern allies have joined. Several major Western countries have held back. Netanyahu is heading back to Israel and has yet to announce whether he will return to Washington to attend the opening session. The fragile Gaza ceasefire has seen repeated violations and major disputes, including Hamas disarmament and future security arrangements remain unresolved. Israel has even prepared plans to return to war, to disarm Hamas by force. The Trump administration is working to prevent a new Israeli ground invasion of Gaza by showing enough progress on Hamas disarmament to delay or even block a return to full-scale war. The U.S. is also advancing a plan that would require Hamas to surrender heavy weapons, including rockets and RPGs, while temporarily allowing it to retain small arms. Crucial questions remain. Who would collect the weapons? Who would control them? And what would happen to Hamas's estimated 60,000 Kalashnikov rifles? Israeli defense sources remain highly skeptical that Hamas would give up small arms that underpin its internal power.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Alec Pollard, coming to you live from Israel with the biggest headlines from across the region. U.S. President Donald Trump set a deadline for talks with Iran to conclude within the next month as a major American military buildup continues. The aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford and its strike group are now heading towards Iran, a deployment that could take up to 4 weeks, a timeline that appears to align with Trump's diplomatic ultimatum. Speaking outside the White House, the U.S. president urged Iran to make a deal, but warned that if they don't, the military is ready. Listen to this.
What can Iran do to avoid attack? To give us the deal that they should have given us the first time. If they give us the right deal, we won't do that. But, you know, historically, they haven't done that. I will say they want to talk, but so far they do a lot of talking and no action.
When are those talks, Mr. President?
They've already started.
Do you want regime change in Iran?
Well, it seems like that would be the best thing that could happen. For 47 years, they've been talking and talking and talking. In the meantime, we've lost a lot of lives while they talk, and legs blown off, arms blown off, faces blown off. It's been going on for a long time, so let's see what happens. In the meantime, we have tremendous power has arrived, and additional power, as you know, another carrier is going out shortly. So we'll see it out. If we could get it settled for once and for all, that would be good.
Now, a crowd of approximately 250,000 gathered in Munich for a major demonstration against the Islamic Republic's regime, marked by calls for leadership change and support for exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi during his visit to the Munich Security Conference. Here's what Pahlavi had to say.
The Iranian people are in full revolt, and the regime is at the weakest it's ever been. It's on the verge of collapse. It's a matter of time before this regime goes. My point, however, is that the world needs to understand, including the U.S. administration, that whether or not the Western world intervenes, our fight will continue and the regime will collapse anyway. The only question is, at what price do the Iranian people can regain their freedom? If they have the support, there will be less casualties and will happen quicker.
Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has reportedly responded to an inquiry from President Herzog's office, insisting that Netanyahu did not ask U.S. President Donald Trump to speak out for a presidential pardon during his White House meeting last week, in which he called the Israeli President Isaac Herzog disgraceful. Listen here.
You know, you have a president that refuses to give him a pardon. I think that man should be ashamed of himself. A pardon over this trial that's going on. The president of Israel, the primary power he's got is the power to give pardons, and he's not, you know, he said he's given it 5 different times, but he doesn't want to do it because I guess he loses his power. I think the people of Israel should really shame him. He's disgraceful for not giving it. He should give it. But Bibi's been a great wartime prime minister, and I've been the best friend to Israel I think that they've ever had. A lot of people say beyond presidents that they've ever had, and we will continue to be. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Meanwhile, Herzog is stressing the rule of law, saying any decision on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's presidential pardon will be made independently, regardless of public pressure from Trump. Is intelligent life out there? It's a question we all ask, and yesterday, former President Barack Obama gave an answer. Yes. Listen here.
Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility, unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the President of the United States.
It's not clear from the interview if he meant that aliens just exist out there in the universe or have visited planet Earth. Despite dismissing a government cover-up, we can be sure his brief statement will spark a whole wave of conspiracy theories. And that's all for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
The biggest danger comes from the normalization, a feeling by many that there is some okay level of anti-Semitism that's out there to just simmer, and as long as it doesn't overflow, things are okay. And I think what we've learned since October 7th is that there is no baseline that's acceptable. We need for the leaders to stand up firmly and say this is treif, and we need it to be in a way that is welcoming to the Jews in their midst so that people don't feel homeless.
Hello and welcome back to the ILTV podcast. I'm Ayan Hoffman, executive editor of ILTV, and we are so happy to have back our viewers and our listeners. We have today William Daroff, the CEO of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. Their event is going to take place in Jerusalem starting this coming week. Welcome, William.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back.
For sure. Now, you know, William, you were here last year in about a year into the war, and here we are now more than 2 years after October 7th. From where you sit, how would you describe the state of the Jewish world today?
I think we're in a much better place than we were a year ago, in large part because the war is over. There's a ceasefire with Gaza. Our hostages are free. Our deceased hostages have been liberated. Just the idea of Hadar Golden being home is something that just would have been unfathomable a year ago. So I think we're in a better place psychically as far as where things stand in Israel and where things stand with the war. I think generally speaking, though, they continue to be tough times. We see anti-Semitism continuing to spike. We see violence against Jews all over the place. We see tensions in Israel's international relations. But you know, Manish Jana, this is what we've been used to for quite a while. But I think, as distinct from a year ago, when I was last here in these beautiful ILTV podcast studios, we're in a far better place.
It's interesting you say that because many Jewish leaders today are describing us as being in the most dangerous moment in the terms of the Jewish world since maybe even World War II. Do you agree then with that framing? You think this moment is no different than what we saw in the past with anti-Semitism, or has it changed?
I think we've definitely seen the metastasizing of anti-Semitism and Jew hatred to a point where it is normalized in a way that also wouldn't have been fathomable 10 years ago. And that continues to be a problem, where you see on the left, in the right, in America and across the world, the normalization of anti-Semitism, the normalization of Jew hatred the normalization of hiding hatred of Jews around criticism of the State of Israel is something that we continue to see across the board, and it is incredibly troubling.
And are you concerned that this could even escalate more? I mean, you said, as you mentioned, in Israel, even though there are still, in some ways, 7 fronts, many of them have been made at least, they're in a better place than they were 2 years ago. The hostages are home, but the anti-Semitism has not really gone down, despite the fact that the war has ended. I mean, the Bondi attack was even after the ceasefire. So are you concerned?
Yes, continue to be very concerned and continue to be focused on trying to ensure that our non-Jewish allies stand with us, that political leaders, civic leaders, journalists, and others recognize the intense insecurity that the Jewish community feels and take steps to provide security for us, both mental security and physical security, that they understand the plight of Jewry and the plight of Jews, and that they understand the need for non-Jewish civil society to stand firm and stand tall with us and on our behalf.
Where do you see as the greatest threat today in the anti-Semitism?
I think the greatest threat, it's hard to just focus on one. I think that there certainly are political and legal and economic threats. We haven't seen the economic threats really have that much of an impact. The BDS movement, for all of its loudness, hasn't really had much impact on the Israeli economy or on the economy in general. I think legally we've seen a continuing increase in lawfare where the State of Israel and Jews in general are caught up in misguided legal adventures. I think in the educational arena, things have gotten better in America since the war has ended, since the Trump administration has come in and very much enforced federal laws and regulations to protect Jewish students. But I think that, again, the biggest danger comes from the normalization, a feeling by many that there is some okay level of anti-Semitism that's out there to just simmer, and as long as it doesn't overflow, things are okay. And I think what we've learned since October 7th is that there is no baseline that's acceptable.
And what about, the role of the State of Israel? Do you believe that this is actually driven by things like the war or the way that the Israeli government is behaving? Or do you think that's just an excuse that's now being used, honestly, by the masses?
I think it is an excuse. It is anti-Semitism and Jew hatred that is just metastasizing in a different way, using the State of Israel as a shield, as a skirt to hide behind. That people, you can't say anymore, you're a dirty Jew, but you can say you're a dirty Israeli. You shouldn't be able to, but you can. And there's this feeling that if you hide it behind something that looks like legitimate criticism, then it's acceptable. But this is not legitimate criticism we're talking about. We're talking about folks who are looking to delegitimize the State of Israel, who are looking to try to really defrock the legitimacy of the State of Israel. And you can look at the double standards and the hypocrisy just in the number of college encampments that have gone up over the Iranian protests. And literally there have been none. Maybe by the time we broadcast there'll be 1 or 2, but I doubt it. And just to see the hypocrisy of the silence on these campuses and the silence among the progressive community, among the Islamist community, where they don't seem to care about Persian lives, is outrageous, and I think shows the double standard at play here.
For sure. You and I were actually both in Australia shortly before the Bondi attack and experienced what it was like in the area. I know, speaking to many of the Jewish leaders, they said that the new term was, genocide supporter, that was the new slur against the Jews, and that was becoming rather mainstream. Now, what is Israel's role in all of this? Our own prime minister has described this as an eighth front. Do you believe that it is an eighth front and that Israel has a role in this battle?
I think it certainly is another front in the war, many fronts that we as a Jewish people and the State of Israel have to combat in. I think that the way that Jew hatred is out there is something that is a concern for every Jew, and certainly a concern for the State of Israel, and something that is a part of the mix as Israel engages with the world community. I think that Israel's leadership on the IRA, the IHRA commission, as a way of trying to ensure that there is a definition of anti-Semitism that is the gold standard, that it's accepted and has been accepted by dozens and dozens of countries as something that is favorable and something that came about in part due to Israeli diplomacy. So I think that diplomacy by Israel, its engagement in the world is something that is a positive and something that will be helpful in the continuing fight against anti-Semitism.
Do you think the steps that Israel's taken so far have been effective? I know we have a diaspora affairs ministry that also works on combating anti-Semitism. We recently hosted an entire conference to combat anti-Semitism here in Israel. But were those steps effective in any way?
I think that there have been many of us, including the government, that have been engaged in steps to try to combat anti-Semitism. I think some of them are working, some of them are not working. Clearly, though, by just looking at the headlines and looking through the newspapers, we know that more needs to be done by everyone, by Jewish organizations, by the State of Israel, by non-Jewish organizations, by other governments. And that's something that we absolutely need to ensure that there's a focus on. That I don't know that there'll be a time when we can actually declare victory, but there should be a time when we can declare that the Jewish people feel a little safer and are a little safer.
And certainly, one of the things you mentioned were non-Jews, or maybe potentially finding some other soldiers to help us fight on this eighth front. The Jewish people are not very large. When you think about who could be our partners there in the world, who are the other soldiers who could fight alongside the Jews, and how do we get them riled up the way we do to understand this is not just a Jewish issue?
I think the other soldiers are all of civil society, lawyers and doctors and politicians and statesmen and teachers and educators. And journalists across the board. It is putting up a front saying that we will not allow, we will not permit, we will not countenance Jew hatred in our midst. And it's something that really should come from the soul. I think that as far as figuring out the messaging, that it should be messaged in a way that resonates with those communities. The messaging that resonates for a 22-year-old Asian American is different than the messaging that resonates for a 32-year-old African American. And so finding the messaging, finding the hook that will bring them in, I think is important and something that we're working on.
Yeah, and certainly, when the war started, I remember many of our leaders talking about the idea that Israel was just the front and first line in a battle that would ultimately be a jihad against the West. And maybe in some ways that is what we're starting to see today, certainly in the United Kingdom and other, areas of Europe, and also, as you mentioned, in the United States. Now, you sit as CEO, as we mentioned, of Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations. Are Jewish organizations built for this kind of war? I mean, weren't they designed for very different kinds of threats?
It's a good question. We have many different Jewish organizations. There are 50 that are members of the Conference of Presidents, some of which are involved in advocacy and engagement and in charitable causes that are very appropriate to what's happening now. But the current era demands quick action, fast decision making. And I think that our organizations are, in fact, coming up to the plate and swinging away in a way that is incredibly admirable. In the almost 900 days since October